Okay. There it is. Pinning the top tweet for the live stream there. And I'll just give you an example of how it works just by grabbing our easy handy dandy Twitter account, and now in Club Deck, boom, pinning the link. And now there should be a link at the top of the room, and we can update that.
Affirmative.
And now that Cheryl's a mod, Cheryl can find the links that I'm tweeting out and put them at the top of the room. And a really clever idea that Pierre DM'd me recently is if we have a room coming up after this one, which I'm clicking on the title of this room and looking at the club to see what room's coming up next. Do we have a room following this one? We don't. Oftentimes we do. And what we can do is in the last 3 minutes of the room, if there's a room that we're all jumping into next, we can put it at the top of the room and say, here's where we're going next.
That's very useful. Then I don't have
what
to
a great
interrupt you
idea.
again.
What
Is
a
that going to be where we have our Halloween party?
Fantastic,
Happy
Pierre.
hour?
So it makes the side rooms easier for people to get to.
Yes.
The deep dive rooms. Yeah, what a great idea. And
thanks for making me binge on Squid Game.
yeah, right?
I binged the whole thing.
Yes. And there's also, by the way, is my volume a little hot? Or how is it?
Nope, it's okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. So there's also, now with this pinning tweets at the top, the possibility to kind of highlight a sponsor. And I think I've not seen anyone do that yet, but I might go ahead and arrange one just to test it. Because one thing, you know what I want to do? First, if people haven't followed the Twitter account, it's very useful. But I think I want to highlight, I'll put up the YouTube account or the LinkedIn account or whatever, because if we get a certain number of LinkedIn group members, then LinkedIn lets us send the live stream to LinkedIn in the same way that we send it to YouTube and Twitter and
Are
Facebook.
you active on LinkedIn?
Do you have a LinkedIn group, Tyler?
Yeah, there's a LinkedIn for Tech News Around the World. I
didn't realize that.
Yeah, watch this. Watch.
You see how you hold out?
Did you update it?
Hold on.
Super
That's
awesome.
so wrong of you.
Hold on. Watch this. So now this should work. Let me edit that link, put that link, bada boom. Did it update yet? No, it didn't. Okay, so let's.
It did.
Yes, it did.
Oh, it did. Does that link work though?
It does.
Yes, it works.
Okay, great. Well, there you go. So the only real reason for doing this is LinkedIn has this thing. You can live stream to LinkedIn if you get a certain number of, like up to, I think it's 500 members in your group. And
you have to apply.
Yes, you apply. And one of the criteria that they look at is it really an active account that is worth turning on live? And so that's kind of cool. And then YouTube, which I'll put in the YouTube direct link in a minute. Also, once you get to a certain number of followers, I think it's 1,000, then you get to live stream live from your phone, your mobile device, rather than your laptop, which I think will be very cool when I'm doing my live events in Stockholm, which I plan to do here in Clubhouse. So that'll be a very cool thing as well.
That's in time.
Yeah. Anywho, so some fun trickery with the links. And then so Cheryl, now that you're a mod, you can, when I'm sending tweets to the Twitter account, you can grab the link and toss it into the top of the room. And here's the first hot story of the day. Well, happy Friday, everybody. So let's jump right into it. And somebody hit the air horn once or twice. There we go. The top story is that some dude named Mark Zuckerberg renamed his company from Facebook to Meta, as Cheryl figured out about a week ago that was one of two incredibly likely names. And we we knew it was either going to be Horizon or Meta, and it turns out it's Meta. And there it is. It is what it is. And he's done a few interviews about it. And he did a live stream about it, which we watched yesterday, where he explained the reasoning about it. And I guess it's been about almost 24 hours now. And so far, so good. Haters are going to hate. And other people like it. Some people hate it, whatever. So the next biggest story is, the New York Times has now written their first piece about Facebook's Metaverse. And it's from Kevin Roos, who's the tech geek at the New York Times. So the story says that Facebook's Metaverse is designed to solve several problems: an aging user base, a dependence on Google and Apple, regulatory risk, and reputational damage. A very cheerful summary. If his new strategy works, a big if, it could help address several of Facebook's biggest problems. Yep, that part I kind of go with. And he says the Metaverse is Mark Zuckerberg's escape hatch. No, not really. It's a whole new, as he explained perfectly in his video that we watched yesterday. It's the new platform for a new era, just like we went through the PC desktop era of web pages and then the smartphone era of apps. Did he not explain it precisely as I've been explaining it? For, this is just, it is what it is. It's the next platform. So to not understand, to kind of minimalize it and call it Mark Zuckerberg's escape hatch, no, not exactly, Kevin. I understand you're not a geek, but maybe consult with some geeks before you make headlines like that. And in all fairness, as we know, a lot of time the journalist doesn't write the headline, but to whoever who did write the headline, maybe they should consult with some folks who know the web a little bit better. So this article says that when Mark Zuckerberg appeared on screen at the Facebook Virtual Connect conference on Thursday, which we watched in this room 24 hours ago, smiling as he wandered through sterile rooms filled with mid-century modern furniture, he looked like a man unburdened. Whistleblower? What whistleblower? Cascading, years-long trust crisis that has regulators fuming, employees bailing, and lawmakers comparing Facebook to big tobacco? Doesn't ring a bell. Instead, Mr. Zuckerberg and his lieutenants cheerfully laid out their vision for the so-called Metaverse, the immersive virtual environment that Facebook, which as of Thursday has been renamed Meta, although everyone except for a few professionally obligated financial journalists will probably keep calling it Facebook, is trying to build. As with most of Facebook's strategy announcements, Thursday's rebranding formalized a shift that has been underway for years. The company already has more than 10,000 people working on augmented reality and virtual reality projects in its Reality Labs division, roughly twice as many people as are on Twitter's entire staff, and has said it plans to hire 10,000 more in Europe soon. Earlier this week, the company announced that it would spend about $10 billion on Metaverse-related investments this year, and it has been acquiring VR startups in what could amount to a Metaverse land grab. There are several types of questions one could ask about this Metaverse strategy. The first and most basic is, what is a Metaverse, and what will Facebook's version of one look like? The question was answered, at least partially, by Thursday's presentation. Another obvious question you could ask is, will this work? It's impossible to say for certain, of course, although personally I'm skeptical that Facebook, a lumbering bureaucracy whose biggest breakthroughs in the past decade have mostly come by buying competing apps or copying their features rather than developing its own ideas internally, will create an immersive digital universe that people actually want to spend time in. Unlike the New York Times, which is the bastion of all innovation. I mean, just the amount of innovation coming out of the New York Times is just, I mean, right? Just so much innovation coming out of there. They're just, whew, wow, you can't stop the good ideas coming out of the New York Times.
Their stock chart is off the hook too.
It's just unbelievable. I mean,
By the way,
when I think innovation, I think dying legacy print media. I mean, that's just, woo, what a hotbed of innovation. I mean, you've got Steve Jobs, you got Apple campus over there, you got Google, and then you've got,
But having said that, I'm not seeing the innovation coming from Facebook. I mean, just look at Clubhouse or Snap or other platforms. I'm seeing much more innovation, in my humble
yeah,
opinion.
they don't need.
Well, Zuckerberg just said
Here's
that.
the point. Here's the point. They continue to keep growing at such a substantial pace with 3.5 billion users. As long as you're still growing like that, you should not be innovating, honestly. If you're still growing and growth is still happening and the growth is satisfactory to everybody
Fair enough.
involved, don't fucking innovate. Don't fucking break it.
But the point being, Tyler, is that they're looking at basically U.S. growth and what's innovation, and where Facebook is making its money is offshore. I mean, it's growing. It's based by what they're doing outside of the U.S., and that's not being accounted for. But he's not wrong. Facebook does not innovate; they buy or copy.
Yes,
Well, he
true.
says that he wants to innovate, but in the last article I read, he alluded to the fact that Apple and Google have been stifling innovation through fees. So he's been sort of forced to do the meta, forced to focus on other things.
Okay, now the article says the most interesting question is, why is Zuckerberg doing this? After all, it's not a prelude to a huge corporate reorganization or a sign of chief executive who wants to give himself an easier job, as was the case when Google renamed itself Alphabet in 2015 and Larry Page handed over day-to-day control to Sundar Pichai. And even though some have speculated that the Meta rebranding is meant to distract from Facebook's most recent round of scandals, it's bizarre to think that announcing a radical plan to reinvent the digital world would make critics less skeptical of the company's motives. Right. This whole metaverse thing they're doing is radically, wildly innovative. One of the most innovative things happening in tech. Like the New York Times. So, as much as they might not have been innovative in the past, he has been obsessed with VR. People who've been watching Mark, who know Mark for the past 20 years, will tell you, yes, he bought up whatever competitors came along. When Oculus came along, he very quickly, nearly immediately, started saying internally at lunches and dinners and breakfasts, this is the future. This is the future. This is the inevitable, absolute, no questions, the entirety, this is the future. Hence, they have invested way, way, way bigger into it than anybody else has, by a country mile. And he's willing to bet the entire company on it. That's how confident he is on it. And he is wildly innovating in that space more than anybody. Where is Apple on this? Where's Google on this? Where's anybody on this other than HTC, to a degree Sony, to a degree a Finnish startup you never heard of called Vario, and a handful of VR app developers?
Well, innovation is a term that's often just overused, quite frankly.
I totally say that by conceding that they did acquire Oculus. It was an acquired. So and that was Palmer Luckey. So he didn't create VR, which, although you could say he's creating this vision for the metaverse that if he keeps going and he's investing $10 billion a year in it, then one could say he is creating the metaverse. He's got so much resources to apply to this vision that he can really shape it in a very significant way. Sorry to cut you off.
Absolutely. No. I mean, So many great points you're bringing up. Just for the, just in the historical context of this new life we live, commercialization is what the game is all about. Okay, and do these big tech fangsters, do they even innovate? Or no, how good are they at innovating? And then we can go back 10, 15 years to Microsoft, right? On how well did they innovate? And their challenge is to keep up, just because this tech stuff, it just keeps growing and growing so quickly. So they have to try to innovate, and if they miss something, they acquire, a la Instagram or what have you. And Palmer Luckey. This market is absolutely a textbook version of one of those ever emerging markets, because it's been around for a long time. So the big bet here is the timing of the pivot into Meta. I mean, it's a tiny market. His other business is monstrous. It's tectonic, right? But the question of whether he's too early, and so it's not gonna emerge as fast as everybody thinks, but it's gonna get a nice big punch, that's for sure. But this is and people have done this. I mean, Sony in a part of their product line, has done VR. So it's not like he's not the first in any stretch. Virtuality 30 years ago was the innovator in this space. Domesticating it is what we're all talking about now. Putting it in everybody's hands, and that at its core is a razor and blades business model. So I've got my Oculus too, and it's pretty cheap. And that's the whole kind of point. So what was missing in this massive release was just more specifics and meat on the business model, and a more specific plan for how to get this started, to coinciding with the release. So that I think that's the only thing that anybody can really point fingers into. It's like any executive or CEO is, if they're in hot water like he is now, these are helpful things, but this is the year to make some kind of a big announcement, whether it's a part of the product line or some new, throwing much more at the Oculus stuff. Doing this massive repositioning is a little bit of a bet the farm, so there's a timing issue there. But he's making a big contribution, but definitely others have as well. And just one last point on, do these big companies innovate and all that? Remember, the measure is what's commercially successful. And me and my friends, we kind of joke tongue in cheek about Google's a one-trick pony in one sense, because the ads, the online ads, has been their big success story. But it's tough. So the point there is that it's really tough to quote unquote innovate and get on the next wave. Thanks. I'm David. I'm done speaking.
Sure, Dave.
To
Yeah,
add on to
I
what
feel like
David
we
was
don't need
saying,
to be stuck
I've
on the
been
word innovation as well. Like, the reality is that the people who are taking on Oculus are on technically the bleeding edge of technology, right? And what Zuckerberg needs is people to actually come on the bandwagon and actually be creators, and people that, do the 3D modeling, do all of the lighting and all of the rendering stuff that's needed, and the manpower that's needed, just like when people needed coders back in the day, just like when Apple needed coders, people needed to create apps, and that was the call to action, right? So this is just Zuckerberg's call to action for people to take on VR, and all the kids are looking at this saying, oh, these jobs are going to be the ones for the future that people need. There's going to be people that are doing computer animation and games design now, where all the innovation is, and saying, oh, I want to go over there because that is the bleeding edge, that's our future, if you understand me.
I was in
In,
some of the rooms, some of the other rooms, and people are talking about they're waiting for Apple to see what Apple's going to do. One of the things I think Mark missed the mark yesterday is that if he'd have stepped out with some ocular goggles on and stepped into the meta creating, he would have done a hell of a lot of more moving the needle forward than asking people to come and help him build it, because I think that's what we're looking for. As we all know, Apple is like slow to the mark. And the reason they're slow to the mark, because they get the chance to look at what everybody else is doing, and then they put that together and they come out with something that just blows your socks off. and they keep that quality there. Mark has a huge, huge hurdle to get to that point. I think that he's ahead of his time. Once again, I don't know if he's going to make it.
Yeah, here's the interesting part, though, and of course, that's a common point, in tech land of how Apple operates, and of course, Irvin, you're exactly right. However, this could play out in a very interesting way. For example, exactly as you said, the way that Apple does that is based on hardware, where some device comes out, and then Apple has their device come out, and then another device comes out, and Apple has their device come out. And with the exception of the iPhone, in a way, that was actually Apple's kind of jumping out in a big way. That wasn't really a copy or response. It was really the rest of the world who copied Apple in that one, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. So, however, in this VR, AR, MR landscape, Apple has incredible strengths in the hardware department. They've got remarkable lack of strength in the social department, in the software services departments, meaning who's using Apple's version of Office, for example, which is called, used traditionally was iWork. I don't even know what they call it now. What is it called? With Keynote and Pages and their version of Excel. Numbers? What do they call that?
Nobody's using it.
Well, this is my point, is that they have their weak, as much as they have incredible strengths in the hardware. I mean, they are the undisputed heavyweight of hardware. But when it comes to the Metaverse is a bit of both, I would say. The Metaverse is hardware, for sure, absolutely, and a whole bunch of an ecosystem, services, and software that they might not be so excellent at executing. If for example, the iMessage, what was the feature that drove Steve Jobs crazy, where he literally freaked out?
Mobile Me did not work
Adobe
at all.
Yes,
Flash.
Mobile Me. Yes,
I
exactly.
was a victim of that, and iCloud doesn't either. Everybody, I'm just saying. Every year, iCloud just swallows and craps my shit. Sorry, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, even Steve went berserk on the Mobile Me team. He's like ready to fire everybody. Like, who the fuck is responsible for this? I want their head to roll. And users felt the same way. This just doesn't feel right, blah, 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 blah. That's what concerns me, that Apple's cloud, the Mobile Me, which has improved significantly over time, and it's quite usable now, thank God. But boy, that took a minute. That took quite a few iterations to get the execution right. And this is what concerns me about the Metaverse, because the Metaverse is both hardware, which they will, no question, they're going to knock it out of the park on the hardware. I think we all agree with that. It's that other piece that concerns me, honestly, and that's not an insignificant piece.
The interactive TV, you have to go back a little bit further to find the perfect example. Interactive TV in the 90s, until Netflix did a simple pivot from mail DVDs and solve the video on demand thing, interactive TV got waves of VC. So I would agree with you. There is an ecosystem, but the other thing is, and what's even more important, is the business model. And that's why, part of the problems that we are facing with just the challenges that Mark's been doing in terms of bumping his head is just this whole idea that it should be free and just ad supported, right? It forces you to make all these business decisions that have gotten us to all of what's occurred. But, and for 20 something years, I've been looking at Facebook emerge and say, man, why didn't you just do what World of Warcraft did? Just charge subscribers for the value that you provide. They'll pay, if it's valuable, a few bucks a month, whatever, right? It doesn't have to be what was it, $10 a month that EverQuest was charging for World of Warcraft, many, many, many moons ago. If he would just, and he's going to have to, and it would be a great thing to really birth the meta thing, is just find ways to just charge the users to participate. There's a bunch, and then kind of do a moderated step back on some of these other overreaching data areas and things like that. I think that would give hope to just the ecosystem and kind of across the board, I would think. But we'll see. We'll see. I mean, that's
Yep.
an opportunity.
Okay, so the New York Times story that is the top story of the day by Kevin Roose, where he starts out the whole 3 paragraphs addressing how Mark seems totally unfazed by the what he calls the crisis that is consuming them. And what I'm realizing is, I think that the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal believe that Facebook is consumed in a crisis. Facebook does not see it that way. When that was abundantly clear in that video. And that's why Kevin starts the article by saying that he seems totally oblivious to the, crisis that surrounds them, and also ends it by saying, regardless, this isn't a vanity stunt for Zuckerberg. In the metaverse, he has found a way, what might be his escape hatch, a way to eject himself from the messy, troubled present and break new ground, untainted frontier. No wonder he looks so happy. Yeah, he did look very happy in there. He looked genuinely enthusiastic and excited about the future of Facebook, and it's driving you fucking crazy at the New York Times that he doesn't give a fuck about all your hit pieces. It's not phasing him, and it's not really bothering their investors or the company as much as you endlessly write about it, that they're in turmoil and it's a struggle and it's a crisis and it's ongoing and it's just the end of the world for Facebook. And no, it's not. Not at all. Not even a little bit. And we saw that in that event. And the New York Times saw that in that event. And that's why that's the center of the emotional content of this piece that he wrote. That,
Tyler,
yes.
was there any coverage of the 2 elements that have come up in the past 3 days regarding the family office that's suing the Zuckerbergs, Priscilla and Mark, and also the case that's against sexual harassment and racism discrimination against the Zuckerbergs
Have not
by
heard.
one of their house staff?
Tell
Those
us more.
actually came out a couple. I didn't go so into the detail of reading it, but it was very fascinating to see that there have been other outlets that have actually covered a disgruntled household help that was claiming discrimination, racism, and sexual harassment, and then also
that worked. That was their
that
house.
works for the house. That works for their house.
Oh wow!
And then also 2 days ago, there's a family
Wait. Just to be clear, this is a singular individual who is a house.
Who used to work for them in the house.
Got that? Who's claiming simultaneously both sexual and
like
racial,
all of it, like the whole
sexual harassment and racial harassment.
Yeah.
Right.
And the second one has to do with a family office that's suing the Zuckerbergs.
Which is who?
I don't know who the family office is. I just found this when I was just you know why I was Googling, Tyler? I was Googling Priscilla as well. Because the reality that we've been talking about, to be very quick, is that he's not making these decisions alone. He's married. He's got Priscilla. And the way that I took it down a rabbit hole, which is really fascinating for me because I used to work for Murdoch, is that this is really creepy feelings of when Murdoch married the Asian woman and then had 2 daughters and basically forbade and removed Lachlan and his brother from the will and replaced them with the 2 girls. And the girls were half Chinese and Australian, but their sons, Lachlan and James, got basically ostracized out of the will to take over the Sky and Murdoch's conglomerate. So it's very interesting because people are underestimating Priscilla as well. I think she has quite a powerful presence with her husband, who's Mark. And I think that's something culturally that has to be looked at as well.
Okay.
It's hard to compare her with Wendy Murdoch, though, I think.
I can tweet it, Tyler. I just Googled it, and it says former Zuckerberg staff members sue companies that run CEO's family office, alleging harassment, discrimination, and it was, I think, 2 days ago from NBC News. So I'll just tweet it on the Twitter account.
And she's claiming sexual and racial harassment?
Alleging harassment and discrimination. An ex-household
sexual harassment.
manager An ex-household manager claims it is a man, I guess. He was groped.
Whoa, this just keeps getting weirder and weirder. Keep going.
This does get weird.
Propositioned while a former security analyst says she was, there you go, she was subjected to defamatory. They are more than one person, that's why.
Unless it's one
Defamatory,
person with pronouns.
Right, unless it's a
yeah.
transsexual
Do
person,
we
yeah.
have a
I don't
link
know.
that we can
Yeah.
throw up top
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I can send you. It says two people.
yeah,
Just
and I've
listen.
got the name.
Two people
I've got
who
the names,
used to
Messi.
work for the household of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, have filed a pair of lawsuits against billionaire couple. So these are two people actually. The case claims that the family companies are responsible for sexual harassment and discrimination by the company employees. Both suits name Shan and Mark Zuckerberg, defendants alleging failure to pay wage, among other claims. So I will just tweet it out. It was done October 23rd, 2020, 2021. So
So
that,
Messi, the next paragraph actually names the employees. The
okay,
plaintiffs are Mia King and an unnamed man referred to as John Doe. Facebook
okay.
itself is not involved in the lawsuits.
That's
Yeah,
wild.
yeah, it's just the household. So it's the individuals. Yeah.
That is why.
It's just part of. I'm not speaking to the allegations at all, but it's just kind of a what you see happen all the time is that the risk of any powerful people or a lot of the domestic staff in some cases, you know.
But I would be careful, Chris, not to generalize. It could be the case, but these things
No, I'm
happen,
saying that
right?
it's a live.
Yeah.
I'm not speaking about the people at all. I'm saying that having, if you're an investor in anybody that you're, a startup, more developed company, you always have to factor in the interpersonal life of the
Yeah, it's a high
founders.
profile person,
That's what I'm
Chris. It's a
getting at.
high
It's not about.
profile
I
person.
wasn't speaking at all
No, no,
about
no.
domestic
It
staff. Just to be
happens.
clear, and
It
just to be clear,
happens.
Messy. Just to be clear,
Yeah.
Messy. My in-laws family is the domestic staff for Donald Bren. If you know who Donald Bren is in Southern California, he is the richest mofo on the planet. And I come from that. So please don't lecture me on that. And I don't mean to get rude. It's just I'm always commenting just on the overall field, meaning when you're a high profile executive, you're going to have external challenges, whether they're true or not. And that's always something investors have to factor in. And that's all I was getting at. I'm sorry.
This is Heather. I just also wanted to say, let's not forget that Facebook started as a hot or not website where Zuckerberg literally took the photos of women from the Harvard website and rated them if they were hot or not.
I was
Okay?
just having
Oh
that
my God, that
conversation
is
Just
so
last
remember
week.
that,
crazy.
guys.
So
Exactly.
It
spot
was
on.
it was an
Again,
extension of that AIM Rate My Face app. Remember,
Yep.
AOL Instant Messenger, and then they just extended it way further. So absolutely,
Tyler,
yeah.
Wait, I don't know how the two correlate, honestly.
There's the other
Yeah,
piece
me
that
neither.
Zuckerberg did. If you look back at his original profile, which you could find, that he wanted to create world domination. He actually wrote that in his first Facebook profile. You could probably Google it,
Right,
and
I
you'll probably
recall.
find it.
Yes.
It's just very interesting how he's in some ways declared what he wants to do.
You're referring to when he was at Harvard.
Yeah, basically
Yeah.
when he was beginning this whole process and the
Yes.
Winklevoss twins,
I'll be
and I think
honest
there's
with you.
still something between the two of
I
them as
think
well,
a
between
lot of the
those
guys
folks.
at Harvard, if you ask them what they plan to do, when they're
World
20 years
domination.
old, the
Yeah.
world domination is probably the number one thing a response that you're going to get from young guys at
Yeah,
Harvard.
I mean,
Well, Tyler, let's
exactly.
take it
I
away
even
from
Jeff
just
Bezos.
Harvard. Like normal guys, like if you are like highly like charismatic or you just want a lot from this world, you say that. Even people that have a low lot in this
Yeah, the
life
guys
say
on
that.
stage are
So
not going to hold that against him because we all
Oh,
thought
you
that
yeah,
when
know,
we
it's
were his
just
age.
locker room world
yeah,
domination. It's just locker room world domination, guys. That's it.
Correct. Every
like
man,
literally.
if you want to argue with every man on this stage simultaneously, that's how you do it because we all thought that.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
when I
No,
was
and
10,
especially
I wanted to go to
if
Mars.
you want
Like,
to
if I
hug.
do that, don't hold it against me. Like, come
sorry.
on.
And by the way, Jeff Bezos has also said he wanted world domination. right? So he's got a tweet out there. He's talked about it a couple of times, and I've
I
got
wonder.
articles to that.
I wonder if Elon Musk might have thought that from time to time.
Of course.
Yeah.
So let's.
I swear they have
The word
Pinky in the
in his
brain. Pinky in the
face.
but
brain.
but here's the thing, yeah. Once you got your first billion, you think it might actually happen, and then you act on it, right? Which is what happened when Elon Musk done it, which is why he made Solar City, and all of the other and Tesla and all the other ventures he made. So and SpaceX. So it's like, yeah, that one. Like I'm not seeing how all of these stories correlate, but going back to what Messi said, and like the story in and around itself, then yeah, we're just gonna need more information on that, because that is, one of the risks you run when you have office as executive staff, I believe they call it in America or something. But yeah.
So I just invited up Ken White, who has welcome. Ken, I really like your bio, first of all, and then before I hand it over to you, somebody just DM'd me an article from the BBC to highlight. The BBC article says about the name Meta. I stand corrected, because I was saying in the first 24 hours, and there hasn't been
I
any.
sent that to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There hasn't been any real strong reaction to the name, except in Israel, where they're pointing out that the word meta means dead, or more specifically, it's pronounced like the feminine for the Hebrew word for dead.
Yeah.
Oh
So,
Oh
no.
dear.
so there's a
Isn't
lot of
that
messages.
poignant?
So
Which,
there's
by
a lot
which,
of.
by the way, I imagine Mark knows, as coming from a Jewish family, as he does. But
Yeah, and if you check hashtag Facebook dead, there's a lot of funny messages around it saying, "Well, there's an ambulance service in Israel that said we're happy to come and do CPR anytime. We're happy to come and write a death certificate and stuff like that." There's weird
the
stuff
the
going on.
best the best
Israel
That could
bantering
be an
face. Mark
oversight.
Zuckerberg is funny, fam.
the
Could be
best
an
part
oversight,
of
and then they have a backup name. Don't forget. No worries.
this article, however, is how it talks about how when KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, arrived in China during the 80s, its motto, finger licking good, didn't exactly translate. The motto's translation in Mandarin is eat your fingers off.
So we
Anyway,
have Dead Book
Num num
nowadays,
num
and the
num.
Book of the Dead is actually part
the
of the
Book of the
folklore
Dead,
from
yeah.
Egypt. Yes, the Book of the Dead from Egypt. So we can see some really, really scary.
Things got very interesting all of a sudden with the Book of the
So
Dead.
Even the dead have a space in the metaverse. Come on,
Yes,
guys.
Tyler,
your
did you
grandparents' ghosts in the metaverse. Yeah.
Tyler?
This is perfect for spooky season and Halloween weekend.
I do
So
you
there's a
remember Marone Gribbets from when he had a company? I mean, it doesn't exist anymore. I don't know who bought up the IP, but he had they were still tethered augmented reality company.
Who was it?
Um, Marone Gribbets was his name, and he launched it publicly. I mean, they've been around for a couple of years, but he had a big splash at TED in probably 2017 or so, and they did really well. They had the Meta 1 and the Meta 2, and then I don't know what happened, if their funding just dried up or they
Hmm.
just couldn't get past the whole tethered experience for augmented reality.
Hmm.
But it was some pretty cool tech, and I thought you might know him,
No, I
being
don't.
because he was traveling in the
he's in
Scandinavian.
Clubhouse.
Hmm.
Is he? Yeah, I actually know. My daughter at the time, she was probably 7 or 8 years old, and was the first child to ever like test and demo, and they did like a little user experience on how intuitive their tech was, because she is a brain tumor survivor, was playing with their art app that they had. So you go into this entire augmented reality experience. And we were talking about it actually as a tool for children at children's hospitals that had a lot of spatial difficulties, and were, trying to rebuild their balance and things like this. And it was actually very cool. And I felt bad that they didn't quite make it, but when it ended up being the name being Meta, I was thinking of how many others over the last decade or so, and wasn't even thinking about all the weird translations and other other parts of the world for that word. But anyway, thought you might know him or remember that
I
company.
don't. But
So actually,
His name is Derek, and he's in here. He's been doing Metaverse rooms for the past 2 days.
so meta actually it comes from the Greek word, right, which means post or after, or what?
No, over and above and
beyond.
around.
Yeah.
It actually means after in Greek. Like literally, if you translate it, meta means after. Like maybe the ancient Greek means beyond, but that's not what it means in modern day Greek. But the Minister of Finance of Greece is actually claiming that Zuckerberg stole Meta from him. He's actually had a company, Meta, for I'm not sure how long it's around. I'm not sure. I think a couple of years, but he
Since 1992.
yeah, exactly. So, and he just put claims out that Zuckerberg stole the name from him, and I'm not sure if he's going to be,
Isn't that around the time where people were taking all of the names like from the .com era and waiting for people to just cash in on them? Like, I'm sure that's around the same time.
well,
Not saying there's a
he has an
correlation.
actual company, like it's the Center for Post-Capitalist Civilization. That's what the company Meta does in Greece. It's been around for years.
I
Tyler,
think
isn't
I
did
I
anybody
think the real definition of meta is manipulate everyone through advertisement.
There you go.
Cheryl, that's fantastic.
No
You
lies
know what?
detected.
Wait, Cheryl, where did you get that from?
Oh
Because
my
if you made that up on the
god!
spot, I have so many
Cheryl
names for
strikes
you to
again.
choose.
Oh
I
my
always made
god!
it up.
So cunningly.
All of
In
your
You
data
know,
belong to us.
there's a meta.
there
No.
was a room actually, Emmy. I think you were there too. That you were talking about. I think there is a genuine discussion that what Meta stands for, and also someone else who is still working on. They say the name Adam. I don't know if I heard it right. I was, multitasking, but yeah, they say there is a person named Adam who's still working on Microsoft. They said that who actually has been the metaverse and the meta, the VR and AR, all those things, who has been pioneering on this. So they are saying that this is typical Zuckerberg, and try to be like the guy who is actually going to be, in the leading space of this whole new technology, whatever it might be leading, and then that he can, say he owns it, he's driving it, he's innovating it, and things like that. So it was actually a very interesting story, and the room was actually very good. So I was. There has been a lot of rooms, but
Okay,
that was one of them that
Cheryl,
I learned.
can you take my most recent tweet to the Tech News Twitter account and
Okay.
pin it, because Evan found this and it's a really beautiful graphic of the five big tech companies: Amazon, Apple, Google, Microsoft, and Facebook, and it shows beautifully side by side how they performed in the first 9 months of 2020 and the first 9 months of 2021. How much money they made in the first, the revenue in the first 9 months of 2020 versus the money they made in the first 9 months of 2021, side by side, and all the numbers line up. So when you look at Facebook, you can now see it in real nice direct comparison to the size of Microsoft and the size of Google and the size of Apple and the size of Amazon, all side by side. And you can see exactly how they stack up next to each other in terms of their revenue and how they have all done in 2021 versus 2020 in terms of revenue of the first 9 months of each of those years. So if you did, you put it up there. There it is at the top of the room.
PTL.
Yeah, it's what a beautiful, kudos to Statista, who does really fantastic work like this. So you can visually see just how much bigger Amazon is than Facebook, and how they all kind of stack up against each other. It would be interesting to see Tesla in that list as well, but that's kind of not a direct tech thing. Anyway.
But but another thing, Tyler, the old FANG acronym that we had
Yes.
now has to change to MANA.
Yes. Well, there's several ways we could. We all have to come up to with a way to figure out how we want. Same with Google. Should be Google be an A or a
Alphabet.
G? Yeah,
It's Alphabet now. It's
Yeah, someone
Mana.
came up with manga yesterday, and
manga. Yeah,
manga in Greek is another word that's like, someone who thinks that they're, you know, the shit basically.
so
Manga, isn't it
Yeah,
animation? In
that's what that word
Japanese,
means in Greek.
anime.
Yeah, I
Like
was thinking anime as well.
like comic
So
books are
yeah,
manga, right?
so
OnlyFans
to them.
is the hentai then, or
what's that?
OnlyFans is hentai?
There is hentai, but it's not
Oh,
only then.
yes. Yeah, saying
That's funny.
OnlyFans is hentai. Yeah, I mean, maybe OnlyFans have some hentai content, I guess. Is that
Isn't
right, Tyler?
isn't
I've never
hentai
even
like
been to
pervert or
OnlyFans, to be
something?
honest.
Mentioning, right?
I imagine it's banned in Thailand.
Well, I think Pornhub has more hentai.
I know a lot of porn is banned in Thailand, and in fact, there was headlines recently that only when the whole OnlyFans was in the news recently about how people were making money on OnlyFans, and then they were going to stop all the porn on OnlyFans, blah blah blah. That got the Thai government interested, and they investigated, and they found some Thai, I don't know what you call them, creators, talent, on OnlyFans, and they arrested them. So the headlines that we saw here in Thailand was these couples were getting arrested for being OnlyFans creators. But I think it's blocked in Thailand. Like
You should be aware. You
yeah.
should be aware. There's actually the city of Tromsø in Norway. They have an OnlyFans account where you actually could get hikes, where they go for a special hike in the Tromsø region. And the Tromsø is very, very close to Svalbard, which is a very distant place. And the thing is that you can actually, on this OnlyFans page for Tromsø, you can actually wish them to go to specific points. There was a very, very large warship named Tirpitz that the German put in the Tromsø fjord during the war. And there is actually an OnlyFans video from the Tromsø tourist department visiting Tirpitz as a diver. And that you can buy that film from Tromsø. So OnlyFans is not only porn, but a lot of it.
The Vienna Museum is putting their nude works on OnlyFans as well, which is a genius PR move. Apple had their quarter earnings report since we met in this room 24 hours ago. And so Apple's Q4 revenues of $83.4 billion, which is up 29% since last year this time. However, the market thought that they were expecting to have $84.85 billion. So they came in more than $1 billion under, which is, one-ish percent. They're off by about 1%. But nonetheless, you're supposed to beat it and by more than a little bit. So the stock is down 3% as a result of missing the Wall Street's estimations for what they should have done for revenue numbers. And they said, understandably, that it's due to chip shortages, basically, that they think they would have had, a very good quarter otherwise, if not for the chip shortage, which was essentially, in some sense, out of their control. And they did the best they could. Amazon also had their Q3 report. They also didn't quite live up to the market's expectations, and they are down 4% as a result. And that's quite concerning that two of the top five were down as a result of their earnings reports. Facebook went up at the end of their earnings report, and Google went up quite notably at the end of their earnings report. Tesla, more than anybody's booming right now. My God, Tesla's just killing it. Anyway, the next big article is that Europol says it has detained 12 suspects that were orchestrating ransomware attacks that hit 1,800 or more victims across 71 countries in the past 2 years. Those are some very busy hackers. So Europol says it detained 12 suspects this week that it believes were part of a professional criminal group that orchestrated a long string of ransomware attacks that targeted large companies and which hit more than 1,800 victims across 71 countries in the past 2 years. The suspects were detained, and let's do a little Tech News Jeopardy here. Let's play time for our favorite show. Where do we think these people were arrested?
Which people?
Ukraine.
What was the question? Which people are arrested?
12
Where the hackers
The
are
run,
located.
hackers,
the
12
ransomware
cyber
hackers.
Gotta be
attackers.
Ukraine. Yeah, Ukraine, Russia.
I would say Russia.
I would
Belarus.
say at work.
I love this room. I'm just saying. Thank you.
Who said Ukraine? Someone screamed Ukraine.
Probably someone
Moi.
before
Dr.
me.
Fran.
Someone before me.
Yes.
Dr. Fran.
Dr. Fran, there you go. You got yourself a point there. It was Ukraine.
Heritage, but not a hacker.
Johan, did you say at work?
He did,
I
yeah.
said at work, yes.
I still don't understand the question,
Comedian.
to be fair.
Well,
What was really the question?
here it is. Europol said it detained 12 suspects this week it believes were part of a professional criminal group that orchestrated a long string of ransomware attacks, cyber attacks, that targeted large companies and which hit more than 1,800 victims across 71 countries in the past 2 years. And the question is, where were the suspects detained?
Tyler, not to be nitpicky, but if it's Jeopardy, shouldn't we be answering the answer with a question in a form of a question? Sorry, I don't mean to be nitpicky, but maybe we should be doing that. Then at least it won't be like people could at least have a chance to at least
Dude,
frame
look
it.
at this look at this angle. She's trying to get Messi's
Yes.
wins all eliminated.
Pew, pew,
Jeez,
pew.
cutthroat lady here. No
So
Trader Joe's for you.
Hey, we're just going to play by Jeopardy rules, maybe.
Here's the quote. Most of these suspects are considered high-value targets because they are being investigated in multiple high-profile cases in different jurisdictions, Europol said. Some of these criminals were dealing with the penetration effort using multiple mechanisms to compromise ID networks, including brute force attacks, SQL injections, or stolen credentials, and phishing emails with malicious attachments, the agency said. Once inside a network, Europol said the group would spend months probing for weaknesses in order to move laterally across the network and expand their access. Now, that's an important point that most people don't realize. Most folks assume that once a hacker has hacked you, that something negative happens immediately. That's rarely the case. Generally what happens is they take their sweet time probing everything. And once they're inside, they can, if they're not able to get into everything, they can use the information they have to learn more, to unlock more, to get deeper penetration into your network, so to speak. So, for example, they might get access only to one of your devices through one of your ports, and then maybe it's a camera, and maybe they get in through a camera that has weak security. But through that camera, they can now, through time, start to see, zoom in on your screen and see your, password. And now they've got your password, and now they got you see what I'm saying? So it can, over time, develop into a much bigger cascading vulnerability. And so that's why I say that it's very possible, not only possible, but incredibly likely that the cyber, how in the way that Russia is clearly setting up and doing a lot of cyber attacks, China as well. But what's more concerning is the stuff that they know now that they've not yet really pulled the triggers on, where they're kind of lying in stealth to a degree. So that, anyway, I just wanted to highlight that point. So the next part.
The thing is,
Yeah.
I can actually elaborate that a bit further. One of the things here that you think that your tiny little firm selling flowers at a shop in a mall in Birmingham is not the target. But the thing is that no, you're not a spear fishing target. You're not aiming for the target. But what you will have your WordPress site hacked by is a robot. And the robot goes by IP number. It tries IP number 1. Okay, no site here. IP number 2. Oh, looky. A vulnerable WordPress site is available here. Okay, so the robot actually puts that on a list and sends to the perpetrators that I have found a vulnerable server at this destination. This is the little things that I scraped from it when I was in poking around. It might be of interest of you to actually take a deeper peek into this one. So when the perpetrators have the time over, they take a peek. This is a small shop in a mall selling flowers. Oh, nothing much interesting here. But wait a minute. They have a point of sales terminal here that is running Windows XP embedded. And God, do I have backdoor tools for that one. And then you get this little flower pot shop in a mall in Birmingham that get all the cards during a week skimmed. And these cards go into the wild and get sold and everything. So even the tiniest little innocent very ill maintained WordPress site could lead to a massive leak of credit cards. This is actually a story, but not from Birmingham, but from Stockholm. Johan done.
Johan, can I ask a question? So what does that mean for VPNs and people that are using VPNs and using IP addresses? You know, how safe is it? Is it worth it? Is it not? Are some of these people actually phishing? How does that work?
The thing is here that when you're using a VPN, you're usually protected by not something called a NAT address translation. Behind a VPN gateway, you have hundreds of people connecting in behind the same IP number. You never have an IP number that is your alone. You're usually hundreds of people, and you don't have any exposed ports on your laptop or on your server by the VPN. That is usually dropped. It's very, very seldom you have port-to-port net address translations on VPN services. So no, you're safe there. But all the servers that you have on your network that are exposed, even by a firewall, the firewall only protects the most basic thing. If we take like a house, a firewall is the one that makes sure that all doors are closed and locked, preferably. But the thing is that if somebody comes with a locksmith kit and actually can open a door with the locksmith things, pick the locks, usually the firewall won't react because it only is there to make sure that the door is closed and locked. If somebody comes and actually fiddles with the lock and opens the door, the firewall is usually not taking any action. You might get it logged, but there won't be an alert. You and done.
So does that mean, sorry, just one last question. Does that mean that would you recommend using VPNs for, you know, daily use and maybe changing the VPN address every few hours or something for added security?
You don't need to change your VPN address. And the thing is, you could use when you're on. We have had this question up several times, as well as Tyler also spoke about this. When he goes to a public cafe, he's very reluctant to connect directly to the free VPN. And if he does, he uses VPN services to actually give. Because when you connect to an open Wi-Fi on a cafe or in the mall, everybody can see your traffic. And here is also one of the misconceptions is that, but all I use is the HTTPS service, so my traffic is encrypted. Yes, your traffic is encrypted, but what's not is encrypted is where you go. You go to Gmail, you go to Hotmail, you go to Yahoo, you go to Google, and all these services. So this is part of the social engineering by just looking at where people are going, because the name server results They are never encrypted. Going, and by then we can actually attack them. This is red team intrusion team things I'm discussing right now.
Yeah.
So we had a security room last week, and we will pop up a new one again. But so we can go into this rabbit hole, and it's a big labyrinth. We go down into there.
Yeah.
You and done.
So
The
the last
overall, sorry,
real
the
fast. Go ahead.
overall approach though, okay, sorry. The overall approach though should just be to try to limit what we call your surface area. So just limit your activity, be smarter with your activity. Just kind of a general framework, and then guys like Johan can educate you on the tools.
So the last paragraph of the article says this week's arrests come after 2 ransomware operators were also detained in Ukraine 3 weeks before, at the start of the month, and 6 suspects who laundered money for the Klop ransomware group were detained in June, also from the Ukraine. Which, by the way, they're Russians; they're not Ukrainians. So, because Biden told Putin, "Stop hacking us," and he told all the Russian hackers, "Don't go ahead and please do it. Definitely do it. Just don't do it from Russia. Please go over to Ukraine and do that shit." So that's why you're starting to see all of these groups pop up in Ukraine. Anyway, the next one is totally related. That Google releases a Chrome browser update that fixes 7 vulnerabilities, including 2 zero-day vulnerabilities exploits, which means you're completely taken over and you don't even know it. You didn't click on anything. You didn't do anything quote unquote wrong. You did everything Johan tells you to do. That's when you're really compromised, when the software that you're using, which, by the way, like the iPhone's operating system, we now know has these zero-day exploits, multiple, 4 that by our most recent count, and one of which is Pegasus. But no doubt there's more. We know of others. But anyway, Chrome has an update that fixes 7 vulnerabilities, including 2 0 days. So if your software is not up to date, then you're really, fighting with a plastic butter knife against hackers. So the next one is that Google and Geo debut the $87 Geo phone Next with a 5.5-inch HD display and Qualcomm's quad-core chipset available November 4 in India. Google and Indian telecom network Jio said on Friday that their much-anticipated budget smartphone JioPhone Next will go on sale November 4th. And then you've got worldwide smartphone shipments in Q3 declined 6.7% year over year. Less smartphones were shipped in the past 3 months than in Q2. Samsung came in first with 69 million units shipped, and Apple came in second with 50.4 million units, and coming in third, no doubt, would have been Xiaomi. So Samsung
Tyler, don't you think that's part of the chip shortage?
Yes, no question. And that's why it affected Xiaomi more than Apple and Samsung, because Xiaomi is more dependent. So the next one is from Bloomberg, that the U.S. says it is working with Taiwan to secure chip supply chains. Yeah, big surprise there. Biden has asked manufacturers to hand over company data, which has faced resistance from firms. That would be an interesting meeting to listen into. It says the U.S. and Taiwan are working together to secure supply chains, Washington's envoy to Taipei said, as global chip manufacturers face looming deadline to meet Biden administration's request for company data. U.S. officials have met leaders of local semiconductor firms. Sandra Oudkirk, director of the American Institute in Taiwan, told reporters Friday in Taipei, adding that they had excellent safeguards to protect proprietary information. I know where this is going. The Commerce Department's request for information is designed to better understand the semiconductor supply chain. Oudkirk, who is the U.S. de facto ambassador in the absence of official ties, said at her first news conference since being appointed in July. What a clever way to say she's the ambassador, but there can't be an ambassador because we can't formally recognize Taiwan. She added that the drive was designed to enable the department make regulations to improve or alleviate the disruptions to the supply chain. Those strains are due to twofold by a surge in demands for goods, labor issues, and caused by global pandemic. The U.S. Commerce Department's September call for companies to hand over information related to the ongoing chip shortage has faced resistance in Taiwan and South Korea due to concerns over possible leaks of trade secrets. Yeah, no shit. While the initiative is voluntary, Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo has warned that the U.S. might use the Defense Production Act or other tools to force the hands of companies that don't respond by November 8th. Oh, God. South Korea's industry minister, Moon Sung-wook, indicated local chip makers were likely to submit minimal data. And Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing, TSMC, said it wouldn't give any sensitive customer information. Smaller peer United Microelectronics said in a release it had already received a courtesy call from officials on October 10th. There have been concerns in China that the U.S. could use materials provided by TSMC and others to sanction Chinese companies. Yep, exactly right. Precisely. That's what it's coming to. And so for those who haven't been following along every day, if you're not an absolute addict like many of us on stage are, let us fill you in. You might have missed a very important day. Was it yesterday or 2 days ago where there was the hat trick of Chinese industry companies who all got rug pulled? It was the
Actually, 4.
There was the cameras, Hikvision. It was the POS systems, PAX, and one other. What was the other big one?
I'm struggling too, Tyler. But there was 3 or 4.
Yeah, the camera companies, the POS systems, and the China Telecom.
That's right. Yep.
So all 3 of them are getting the kaboot out of the U.S., and the U.S. will also, because of national security reasons and for the...
Wasn't that Huawei as well?
Huawei, it was a long time ago. They got kicked out many months ago. So did DJI, the drone company. Lots of companies have. But they're constantly finding more, like these POS systems where you go to pay with your credit card. By the way, this is like one of the biggest POS systems on the planet. Like, has the biggest market share of any POS system. Turns out to be a Chinese company that's sending the data back to China. And even worse is infecting the companies that use it with malware and setting them up to be cyber attacked. So then you have the camera companies, which is Hikvision, again, the most popular camera system in the world. And then you have mobile telecom. And the point is that the FBI has been investigating them, has evidence, took it to a court, got a court order, went in and shut the shit down. And they're going to shut down all of it because it turns out that everywhere they look, these Chinese companies are abusing their role and are essentially acting as conduits for the CCP. So it's exacerbating and accelerating this very large decoupling. And now you know why the U.S. is now going into the semiconductors and doing this deep dive on what's going on with supply chain disruptions, yada, yada. And they're going to find, as they already think they know, that China's doing more shenanigans, and that's going to lead to more sanctions. And they're right. That is what's going to happen. And China knows that's what's going to happen, and that's why they're worried about it. So you're going to see massive sanctions stacked up against China simultaneously. And I will explain it to you in a way that I don't know why no one else has the gumption to express it this way, but America's taking advantage of the China in its economic weak moment with Evergrande, and where the CCP kind of took things maybe a little too far in regulating to address the declining birth rate. And forgive me if you haven't been with us for the past few months where we've gone over that at length. So if you're not familiar with that, welcome to the club. We've covered that very extensively over many weeks. So while China's dealing with the kind of rumblings of the real estate bubble that's unfortunately popping faster than it should. They're trying to do a soft pop, which is obviously incredibly difficult to architect, and it might be more of a hard crash. What one thing that the U.S. could do to turn that into a hard crash is, why don't we right now, right while they're walking a tightrope and losing their balance, or now's the time to shake the rope. Now's the time to go in and just put in hard trade, blocks on all the Chinese companies, all of them. Oh, the big camera company, the big POS company, all your big companies that are all doing business with the West, cut them off now, right now. And then they're going to fall off the rope. They're going to economically collapse, as I predicted months ago. And I can't even take credit for it. It's Peter Zeihan who deserves all the credit for that. So, remember the comments, China won't exist in 10 years? So it appears the U.S. is not hesitating to cause economic headaches for China at a time when it's desperately trying to get its footing economically. So, the next article.
How do you get, like, I mean, how do you not impact economically if you are having some of the policies that actually kind of scares, business owners, investors, and things like that? I mean, what they did with the ed tech and things like that would spook any kind of investor, right? It doesn't matter what sector they invest, but they would be worried. Even founders, some of the founders that successful founders having to struggle, even survive. What our buddy from what's his name? I forgot. The Alibaba.
Jack Ma.
All those. Jack Ma, exactly. Here even in Ethiopia, that he was having initiatives. He came in, he visited incubators, accelerators. There was a lot of buzz, and all of a sudden, he's just not there anymore. So these things have a huge, profound impact in not only in China's economy, but it also in economies where they have so much influence, right? Here in Africa, they are all over it. Now we're going to have to think about how companies are investing in here. What are they going to do? Huawei was a big presenter in this Digital Innovation Africa Summit I attended the last 2 days. There were big ZTE, Huawei. They all are trying to compete with Safaricom and M-Pesa because the Ethiopia Telecom is opening up. I mean, it was quite interesting and big, but we have to think about it, right? If they are not easily impacted by the government, they must be colluding with the government. And if they are, you kind of worry to the business with them, right? So it does have a lot of implications, including the political system that scares some of us, who our parents got impacted heavily with the socialism system, for years. So these things do have impact within their own country as well as globally where they do business.
Yeah,
So,
here's the next headline. from Bloomberg. Huawei does their Q3 third quarter earnings report. Revenue fell 38% year over year, where nearly every other tech company is going up 38% year over year. Huawei goes down 38% year over year. That's not easy to do. That's not easy to go down 40% in a year.
Hey, Tyler, what do you mean when you said China won't exist in 10 years?
That's Peter Zeihan, read Disunited Nations.
And what does he expect to happen?
That there won't be a CCP.
They're going to
You mean the
democratize?
government or China? CCP is the government. China
That
is
the
China.
the CCP is the like the GOP in the U.S. Right, but they have a unique level of
Oh,
control.
okay. So
Yeah,
there'll be a political party. They might open up or something, some sort of political. Okay,
there will
got it.
be a different
What we
political
call
party.
regime,
Yeah.
what we call regime change.
Got it.
I don't
So
see that happening easily, and especially not in 10 years. I don't.
read the book.
A power vacuum would arise if the economy collapses, because that's the only string the puppeteer has.
So the next one is
And
stop.
also the fact that
Just
they're
they
also
could
and
just
also
push Xing out, just like Khrushchev was pushed out after the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they just replaced him.
and also possibly the cultural shift that that Tyler's been talking about in the room. If that continues to happen, where the younger generations are feeling the squeeze, their superstars and their culture starts feeling the squeeze. I mean, that I can see that contributing pretty
Well, here's
fast if things go downhill.
Yeah, but here's the thing. They've been feeling that squeeze for over 20 years, yet the CCP gets more creative on suppression. And more importantly, the CCP has a hold on most of their companies that earn the greatest tier of income. So unless something happens with that upper echelon, I don't see it happening.
But also, what is the ratio now, male to female, since they had the standard of only one child for so long, and people wanting it to be a male? I wonder what that ratio is now, and whether or not that would cause some sort of upheaval as well.
So here's the headline from yesterday in Reuters. Vegetables pricier than pork, worry Chinese consumers costs swell. Vegetable prices are surging in China after heavy rain swamped crops this month, fueling concern over food price at a time when consumers must brace for a hike in energy costs. Unusually heavy rains drenched northern swaths of China in September and earlier this month, flooding vegetables. But all the vegetables are dead in the ground, says Zhou Ryu, a farmer who cultivates 17 acres in the Zhuancheng county of the province. There's little left to pick after fields of spinach, cabbage, and coriander were flooded, she added, while some farmers had not replanted as the weather had already been too cold. The price of spinach has jumped 100%. All the vegetables, it says the prices of broccoli, cucumbers, and cabbage have also more than doubled in recent weeks. The rocketing prices are a hot topic on China's Twitter, like Weibo, with many users saying vegetables now cost more than pork. Coriander is now this 17.8 yuan per half kilo. It really is more expensive than pork, wrote one user in the eastern province. The rise at a time of growing scrutiny for inflation is worrying government officials in Beijing, who are keen to ensure sufficient food supplies ahead of winter. The average wholesale price of vegetables in the capital has jumped 40% since last month, while some leafy vegetables rose more than 50% in the past month. The city government said Tuesday authorities in Beijing have warned the prices could rise further in the next few weeks as the city looks further south to source its vegetables when temperatures fall and high energy prices boost transport costs.
This is how it happens, Ken.
Does,
When when Uncle Xi can't control his country, can't control the pricing. When your broccoli doubles and triples in cost, and you're paying more for vegetables than pork.
well, it's worse
And
than that.
pork,
It's worse than that because the U.S. and its allies can and historically has, for those who are students of these things, played its own kind of puppet games behind the scenes in countries' moments of weakness like this. China does this as well, by the way, and it's doing it in Myanmar at the moment, for example, and it's playing an interesting game in Sudan at the moment as well. So they're familiar and they're aware, and that's why about 3 months ago they called George Soros the son of the devil and an economic terrorist, because they know that when things get real bad, he will be ushered in with his Grim Reaper sickle to swiftly chop them off at the waist. So there's
Tyler, can I ask a quick
yes,
question on
you could
that?
call it economic warfare if you want to. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, it's just going to be something silly. Is pork in quotes?
No.
Like, are they really talking about pork?
Yes, they're talking about pork, yeah.
Oh yeah, you don't understand pork and Chinese
China? Oh,
people.
yeah.
I'm ethnically Chinese, and if I see pork, man, I'm just on it.
I know, but I'm not necessarily sure if the pork from my Chinese restaurant is actually pork. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's always chicken, right?
In China, it's pork. But it's with the energy costs are getting really high. The food costs are getting really high. This is why I said that the rumblings that are currently underway, they're kind of losing their footing economically, and that's when now let's simultaneously do a full court press, a blitzkrieg on the economic front, and shut down the camera companies, all of their most profitable, successful companies internationally. The U.S. can shut it down and tell its allies to shut it down, and then those companies crumble going into winter. So it's a part of economic warfare that most people don't study. So the next one is Huawei's revenue fell 38% year over year. Nebraska-based company Cam, which offers a photo documentation and communication app for contractors, raises $30 million Series B. TikTok is testing a tipping feature to let select creators accept money. Creators with more than 100,000 followers can apply to try it. They get their own little tip jar. And the next one says, while the Pixel 6 receives good reviews thanks to its tensor system on a chip architecture and other advances, hitting a 7 million shipment goal requires carrier distribution, a weakness for Google. It's a great point. And I mentioned we've covered that one briefly when we met last time, 10 hours ago, but it's also part of the problem is the reason that Google struggles to have carrier relationships is because Google itself acts like a carrier at times with Google Fi, where the carriers don't like Google. And that's hurting their ability to sell lots of phones, where Apple doesn't try to act like a carrier. And so they're still quite friendly with the carriers. Anywho, the next one says Swap, a Sao Paulo-based startup that helps clients manage their financial operations via APIs, raises $25 million from Tiger Global. Zendesk plans to acquire a startup called Momentive, which owns SurveyMonkey, in an all-stock deal worth nearly $4 billion, causing Zendesk stock to fall 16%. And meme-based coin Shiba Inu rose 160% this week, briefly surpassing Dogecoin to become the 8th biggest cryptocurrency by market cap. Twitter launches the Spaces recording feature that was announced last month to a limited number of Space hosts on iOS and all listeners in iOS and Android. And Google says it's rolling out end-to-end encryption phone calls on Google Fi. As I said, Google acts like a carrier, hence carriers aren't so excited in selling their phones because they feel like Google will eventually kick them out of their business. That Google Fi might eventually be used as a weapon against the carriers, which it will. They're right in assuming that. So,
Can I add a small comment here?
sure.
Maybe I just didn't understand it, but I was always under the assumption that, phone calls over the cellular network were encrypted to some extent. I didn't know, what level the key is, but I always assume that when you're on cellular, it's at least from here to the, to the tower encrypted and through the network, but I guess not.
But yeah,
Guess not. Guess not, sir. That encryption is more of a hash than a crypto. It actually you could have a Raspberry Pi decrypt 3G and 4G traffic. Not 4G traffic. The newest ones have a better one, but the old GSM and the old 3G encryptions, you can do that on Raspberry Pi for hundreds of channels simultaneously because it's a real joke, Johan.
okay, a startup called Bolt that you'll start hearing more about if you haven't already, which offers one-click checkout service, is seeking to raise 777 million at a 10 billion valuation. And we covered the smartphone shipments, and I'm refreshing to see if any new ones came in since we started an hour ago. And not really. So we get to go into the tweets. Oh, Microsoft acquires a company called Two Hat, which is a content moderation provider that it has been working with for the past few years to improve Xbox communities. The deal will help Microsoft's consumer services push. Microsoft has acquired Two Hat, a content moderation provider that helped it keep harmful content off of Xbox.
How has
Okay,
Microsoft not announced any metaverse stuff?
they do hardware, the HoloLens, which they're selling. They did a $20 billion deal with the Department of Defense. But that's a good question. I think they're taking a more old school Uncle Bob Microsoft approach to it.
They're going the corporate route. They're using it a lot at, my wife's company. She uses HoloLens to view and, clinical manufacturing processes from her desk here at home. And it's been very beneficial for her because she's on a factory floor essentially. So being able to tour the factory, have someone tell someone, hey, can you please walk me to this machine you're having problems with, is really, really insightful for her.
Or is it that those young people who find who is in metaverse, who is in this kind of technology, is no longer finding Microsoft sexy to work in?
I think it's a completely different model for them, right? They're,
I
they're
mean,
not
we
they're
just
not looking for consumer data. They're not looking for social network or content creators, right?
Yeah, and then Tyler, last night you just announced that Microsoft is surpassing Apple in market cap. Is that right?
Yeah, they're kind of neck and neck at the moment.
Yeah, but Ken, what product do they have right now on the market for VR?
HoloLens.
HoloLens.
Yeah,
HoloLens is a legit, I mean, Microsoft deserves a little credit with that. I mean, it wasn't spectacular, but if they keep doubling down, they got
Yeah,
to.
it's all industrial applications and military,
Yep.
DoD,
I,
healthcare.
I
I mean, there are a lot of use
I,
cases
I
that are
don't
pretty.
I don't think the VR market's been proved for them enough on the consumer side, which is why they switched HoloLens over to more corporate and industrial.
I'll,
They're really pushing more on cloud gaming when it comes to that.
I'll see if I can have the boss speak on it at some point. She's sleeping right now, but I'll ask her because I've never personally experienced it. She just tells me, and so I think there's things like visual overlays on a screen for the person walking around with the Hololens, and then the viewer can get that data
Hmm.
streamed to them. So I'll ask her if she's up.
Yeah, it's some mixed reality form of VR and AR. So you have digital content overlaid in your environment, but then you also could be immersed in in that virtual content yourself without being able to see the actual environment in your reality. They did talk about going into a consumer product, but that was sort of very minor. They're mostly on the business enterprise side, but they have some very huge contracts, as Tyler mentioned, with.
I think they're several $1,000s a headset, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, around $3,000. Just to interject here, Microsoft does have a VR for consumers and enterprise with the HP VR headset, which is called HP Reverb G2, and Reverb Omnicept, which is the enterprise version with extra tracking, like eye tracking from Tobii and yeah, biometrics and stuff. So that's for the enterprise VR from Microsoft and HP.
I mean, they've got significant experience in this in the gaming space as well, which is where I come from. But Connect, for example, which was Project Natal, um, they're feeling this out. I would be shocked if they're not working on something they just haven't announced yet.
okay.
Yeah, they also have the Mesh platform, which is their business metaverse, interconnecting everything.
It just seems like they would be the only competition really out there with Facebook at this moment.
Are we ready for the tweets? Here come the tweets.
Wait, before you do that, can I just go back to we were having technical issues here. So can I just go back to two things? One is Shiba Inu,
Yeah.
which there is a story that is weirdly not getting a ton of press, but there's a wallet that is holding 8,000 Shiba Inu coins. So that's about 13%. I don't know if you guys talked about it, but it holds about 13% of Shiba Inu. That's enormous. That's an enormous chunk. So when that happens, right, you have to wonder one of two things. One is it a dead wallet? We don't know. In which case, that's just lost, to the system. But if it's an active wallet, then the first thing you have to suspect is manipulation, right? So this person has a vested interest in the price accelerating for no known reason. It's not. So here, like you look at the fundamentals, and the fundamentals are, has it increased in utility in some way? They build it as a community building coin. Has the community actually activated and grown some fundamental base? And no, and that hasn't particularly happened. Everything is based on this price action, and that always makes me suspicious that there's a pump and dump or something like that happening. And when you find out there's a wallet that has an enormous amount that's in there, and there's no real fundamental shift, that is a cautionary sign. I am not saying specifically that's happening. I'm just saying that there's some signs there that are a little upsetting, or little, cautionary. So that's happening too. And then the other thing is, I don't know if you talked about Robinhood and their numbers that came out. They way missed their targets.
Yeah, by a lot.
And that the issue there is not just, that sucks for people who have shares in it, but it's because trading was low, right? So trading was much lower over the past quarter for them. And what that signals is the concerns that the SEC and other regulators had over revenue based on churn, right? The gamification related to trading that was generating their revenue. Since they had to cool that, that reduced their revenue significantly, which just lends credence to their concerns that the way that they've employed gamification itself is not wrong, but the way that they've employed gamification and payment for order flow are problematic. So I would look for very strong regulations coming out relatively soon about those, because we've now seen it in like three different divisions of the SEC have mentioned it, and two other regulatory agencies have discussed it also. So that's happening. And then the really interesting thing that happened is the CFTC is actually fighting the SEC for the power grab. I did not think that was going to happen. We've never seen that before. I mean, we've never seen like naked politics and regulators before. So all of this is like super like novel, and no one really knows what to do with it. But so Gensler's kind of had this power grab happening, and he's working with other jurisdictions to create some sort of, multi-jurisdiction approach to regulation, especially, crypto and financial crimes, which they're not related, right? Those are just two separate areas. But he wants the SEC to lead it, and part of that has been
sort of saying that this, CFTC should be under the SEC's aegis. And he used to be the head of the CFTC. So he's like, it makes sense. It makes sense. Right. So the CFTC, surprisingly, who never comes out with anything that's like other than, yes, we approve this. Here's a clarification. They don't really come out with any sort of statement. Was like, no, we are the ones that govern, Bitcoin. But technically, they don't govern Bitcoin. They govern derivatives of Bitcoin. There isn't any clarity over who specifically governs Bitcoin and ETH. What the CFTC governs is the like those ETFs and things like that, things that do futures contracts. Well, and the ETFs are also regulated also in part by the SEC. So it's just, you don't really see, the boring regulatory civil servant positions all like, wait a second, you're on my turf. This is such a, a 30s, 40s thing. It's just very weird to see it right now and so blatant. So I mean, this is kind of a popcorn moment. So I'm kind of like watching and figure out like, okay, how is this going to come out? Because generally speaking, the SEC has so much more weight and power than the CFTC that it just it's just this general assumption they just roll over, but that's not happening. So more coming on that.
Alrighty, here we go. We're ready for the tweets. Like this one from Sue Domini, that air pollution reduces sperm count through brain inflammation. People are trying to figure out what's going on with the sperm counts. And even our friend Evan sent in a really cool graph from Statista about declining fertility, fragile is from male fertility, average sperm count of Western men in 1973 was 337.5 million, and the average sperm count today is 137.5 million, which is far less than half. It's about 35%ish. So
this is a trend. I mean, are we going to go extinct as a species? Because this is not a trend that looks positive, or is it
right.
leveling
It
off? I
it
wonder
didn't it
where's the.
didn't just say Western men though.
Yes, it does.
Oh,
So
okay.
I
So
mean, we're not going to go extinct,
Western men.
but
But there's an issue in Asia as well.
Well, yeah, the
Hey,
I think
decline.
a
are
bigger
keeping up
part of it
our
has
end
to
of
do
it.
with the food industry and what's happened over the last 40 years
Yep.
there.
There you go, Annette.
Yeah, the
Yes.
birth rates are declining in Asia more than anywhere,
Yes, for sure.
but they
I
don't
just want to
necessarily.
say
Male
it's
female
not women.
ratio, right?
We,
There's not enough women.
no, we're
No,
doing
they're
our
not
part, and
producing.
there's
Like,
no egg issue.
Yeah, prior to this article on air pollution, the common thinking for the past 2 decades has been that the decline is related to environmental chemicals that mimic estrogen, so-called estrogen mimetic drugs, and not necessarily drugs, but chemicals. And organophosphates and other pesticides are high in that. So what's really needed is an epidemiologic study to look at the geographic distribution and how that may be related to environmental influences, whether pesticides and other organic chemicals that are man-made versus air pollution. I mean, you should see a striking difference between city dwellers and urban dwellers if it were air pollution. And I've not seen any data to support that.
The challenge there,
Also,
though, I'm sorry, John, the challenge is, and I studied air pollution. That's really actually my life passion. So PM 2.5 is subalveolar, so that's a particulate matter under 2.5 microns, right? So that can enter the bloodstream. And the issue with assuming that it is always around urban areas pretty much is localized to the Southern California basin, right? Because we have the inversion layer that inhibits the travel of our pollutants, but
Well, it's
everywhere else, this
downwind.
is it's
It happens in
dispersant.
Athens as well. It's the same
It's
type of
dispersant is
environment.
kind of what I'm
but
getting at, and so that's a challenge to just say like urban areas only because when I was in college in 2002, Dr. Samuelson, who runs the National Fuel Cell Research Center, and other things, was my thermo teacher. And he told us that a third of the air pollution in Southern California comes from China. So, and unfortunately, Southern California is a little microcosm where our mountains and the way the sun rises keeps the air pollution from ever leaving the basin. So I'll shut up now.
No,
But it's also
actually, so a
cyclical
lot of
because
that.
then you have
Oh,
phytogenetics that's then impacted, which leads right back to what Annette said in terms of food. And we did see in researches before where phytogenetics and infertility were extremely linked. This isn't a surprise. It's just that we haven't done anything to correct it.
so a lot of the inversion layer actually has changed a lot in the last 15 to 20 years, and you can see part of it was work on emissions, right? Because used to not in Pasadena, you still couldn't see the San Gabriel Mountains, and now it's very easy to do that. The
It's
other
the
part
it's
is
the reformulated
well,
blends and stuff like
yeah. Yeah, but the other part of it is our weather system has changed because we get a lot of the Santa Ana winds now, that inversion from the the like the El Nino years or whatever seem to be every year now. So we get a lot of the wind coming from the mountains. So that's adding a different level of pollutants, but those are like plant pollutants more than anything else. But the thing that so I don't know if this study was based on Western like the Western conditions because it was focused on like I want to know what the sample was. Did they only focus on the West, or did they do a global study and it turned out that the Western people like I want to know like where were they sampling? What is the focus there? Because it may be that it was only done through one organization that only had access to the West, right? Because what you would really see is what you saw, like the most dramatic changes that happened after the shutdown was over like in like Shenzhen and I think Beijing, right? Where you saw like clear skies and people were like, oh my gosh, the skies are clear because they had to shut down the factories because of the quarantine. So in those places, because it's so concentrated, you would see a marked impact. Even with flow away from those areas, the pollution tends to sit so remarkably in those areas that you would I would expect to see a direct correlation with those areas, like to John's point. The other thing is I read a study, and I want to say like 7 or 8 years ago, that was about and it didn't focus on air pollution at all, but one of the declining birth rate issues was because of BGH, which is bovine growth hormones, that was impacting the like puberty was coming so early for both girls and boys, that the issue with boys is that early maturity because of the hormone related changes, that the early onset for women didn't have as much of an impact in terms of birth rate, but impact on boys actually did have more because they literally needed additional time for like the factory to work. Like the sperm maturation did match the puberty rate at the same time. So I don't know if that's still an issue or if that was just an ancillary issue that they were researching separately. I don't know. We're very careful with all of those things in our house, but we can afford to be. It's more expensive, right? But that's I've noticed a definite difference in around fourth grade. You can see which parents I think are dealing with additional hormone. Like there's just a separation in you could tell what kids are eating at home, but I don't know if that's still relevant relative to this the air quality study.
So here's some of the air quality study says, our findings show that the damage due to air pollution, at least to the sperm count, could be remedied by removing a single inflammation marker in the brains of mice, suggesting that we may be able to develop therapies that could prevent or reverse the damaging effects of air pollution on fertility, said the lead study author. The current study, which was published in September in the science journal Environmental Health Perspectives, attempted to trace the roots of the worldwide fall in sperm count during the previous decades. Healthy mice and mice bred without a sign of inflammation in the brain, termed inhibitor kappa B kinase 2, were studied by the whole team of researchers, which included a whole bunch of folks you never heard of. They studied the impact of polluted air on both healthy and mutant mice who didn't have the the brain inflammation before testing their sperm counts. And yeah, apparently if you remove that inhibitor kappa B kinase 2, then you might remove the link. And it says researchers have known for a long time that the air pollution can raise the risk of illnesses including obesity, diabetes, and infertility. So maybe it is partly women as well, but they didn't know how. Our air pollution affects sperm count in mice by introducing inflammation in the brain, according to University of Maryland School of Medicine. Scientists already know that stress affects fertility and sperm count because the brain has a direct link to the reproductive organs. There you go. So the next one is that life probably exists elsewhere in the universe too, says NASA chief. Do we search for alien life to kill the feelings of loneliness, or to search for a new vista of scientific research? The question is complex. Whatever the reasons may be, we are keen to see if there's anyone out there in wide expanse of the space besides us. To date, we have had predictions but not confirmations, but NASA's chief is remarkably open to the possibility of life existing in some corner of space. Okay, good to know. So the next one is from Sudamini, that General Motors boss Mary Barra says that GM can beat Tesla by 2025 in the number of cars sold, EVs sold specifically. Call me skeptical.
Is this a stand-up night?
Yeah, I guess it depends if they have a really low priced vehicle, and then they could. If they come out with like a $15,000 vehicle, then they could sell.
Electric Silverado could do it.
So I'll tweet that one out to the Twitter account. And then next up is the one that took us into a real deep dive conversation when we met last time. And for those who weren't with us last time, we're going to not go into a deep dive. It took us into an amazing, very moving conversation. And the headline is from Reuters that China's building a military outpost in Tajikistan near the Afghan border for the Tajiks, meaning, as it says in the article, China will finance the construction of an outpost for a special forces unit in Tajikistan near the border. The post will be located in Tajikistan's eastern autonomous province in the Pamir Mountains, which border China's Xinjiang province, as well as northeastern Afghan province, but will not be staffed by no Chinese troops will be stationed at the facility, a parliament spokesperson said. And why this is interesting, well, let me read the rest of the article because it's also important. It says the Tajik president has refused to recognize the Taliban government. Tajikistan borders with Afghanistan in the north. The north of Afghanistan borders with Tajikistan. And the president of Tajikistan doesn't recognize the Taliban government, calling for a broader representation of Afghanistan's ethnic groups, of which there's about a dozen ethnic groups in Afghanistan. The Taliban are predominantly Pashtuns, which is the largest ethnic group. The second largest ethnic group are the Tajiks. And so the Tajik president wants to see the Tajiks in Afghanistan playing a role in the government, which they currently don't do. Hence, he doesn't recognize the Taliban, which is mostly Pashtun, almost exclusively Pashtuns. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. The next point is that Kabul, meaning Afghanistan, has warned against meddling in its domestic affairs. Has warned, who is that? Dashanbe. Oh, that's
You
the
remember?
government. Dushanbe is the government in Tajikistan. So, that's the city. Okay, so they mean the country. So Afghanistan is warning Tajikistan against meddling in its domestic affairs. Right, because the Taliban doesn't want to see the Tajiks in Kabul trying to push to join the government. They're saying, don't start a revolution here. So the Taliban is telling Tajikistan's president, don't meddle in our politics. Right? We understand you have ambitions to have a more broader representation of ethnic groups in our government, but that ain't going to happen. So, according to Russian media, the Taliban have struck an alliance with ethnic Tajik militant group based in northern Afghanistan near the border of Tajikistan, which seeks to overthrow the Tajikistan government. So it's quite a bit of conflict there. You've got Tajikistan's president wanting Tajiks who live in Afghanistan to join the government, and then you've got the Taliban now, according to Russian media, partnering with a Tajik militant group in northern Afghanistan that's aiming to overthrow the Tajikistan government. And that would mean that the Taliban, in addition to having now taken over Afghanistan, would next take over Tajikistan, which would vastly increase its border with China, if I'm not mistaken, if my geographic memory serves me well here. In any case, the article goes on to point out that the Russian-led regional security organizations held exercises last week near the Tajikistan-Afghanistan border designed to demonstrate that Moscow stands ready to protect Tajikistan in the event of an incursion from the south. Because Moscow, well, here's why. This is going to get very serious very quickly. China is a major investor in Tajikistan, and Beijing has also acted as a donor on several occasions, handing over, for example, a new parliament building free of charge to Tajikistan, which is bugged with spyware, all up and down and left and right, just like they did in Ethiopia when they built the African Union. Now, whether or not they know that yet, which I assume they do. And what's interesting about this is both Russia and China are wanting to build defenses on the Tajikistan border because of, and shame on this journalist for not explaining why. The headline here is that China is building this military outpost for Tajikistan near the Afghan border, and gives no context as to why. There's a very, 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 very important reason why that they don't mention at all, not even a little bit, zero, zip. And in fact, the bigger story is why they're building it. The big story isn't that they're building it. As soon as you understand why they're building it, you'll understand why they're building it. So what's happening is the economy of Afghanistan is currently, not past tense, not future tense, but now today is collapsing. People are already dying of starvation, and the UN estimates that it will be 23 million people will die of starvation this winter. 23 million.
23, that's insane.
So, because of that, the question is, naturally, when these scenarios arise, people try to flee. And the question is, where will they try to flee to? And now
China.
They might go into Tajikistan first. They're not so entirely eager to jump into the Xinjiang province of China because they've heard what's going on there. But Tajikistan sounds kind of interesting. But of course, Tajikistan doesn't want them. And China doesn't want them to go into Tajikistan, and nor do the Russians. They don't want 23 million starving people to relocate to a border country of theirs, namely Tajikistan.
Tajikistan has its own issues with Kyrgyzstan, so they don't really, they can't afford the influx.
For those who, that's a really wild conversation. The relationship between the Uzbeks, the Tajiks, and the Kazakhs, it is that if you look at them, this is really wild. If you look at the map of those three countries, they were intentionally designed. I know this sounds absurd. It's not. It was intentional. And when you look at the map, you'll realize, oh, somebody played some really crazy fucking games over a lot of vodka when they designed the borders of those countries. Russia intentionally designed those borders to overlap each other like a swirling mix of chocolate and, like when you make a swirly cone out of vanilla and chocolate where the colors swirl together. Russia intentionally made their borders do that because they know that's a recipe for eternal conflict. And they want
Keep them up. Keep.
Russia wants
Damn right.
the Tajiks and the Uzbeks and the Kazakhs to eternally fight each other so that they don't come up to Russia, so that they stay vulnerable, which they have been. As Sharon just said, they fight each other constantly. They don't have a choice because the borders are overlapping each other in a swirl. So the point that if the Afghans have nowhere to go, Pakistan has made it abundantly clear they're not going there, and Tajikistan looks as like one of the most likely places. So China doesn't want that to happen. Russia doesn't want that to happen. Tajikistan doesn't want that to happen. So they're building a military post, on the border there. And that's,
You remember last month I said if I'm China, I put a toe in Afghanistan, I toe in this area, but I wouldn't really put all of my might there. And now we're seeing China do exactly that.
Yeah. So
It's just basic fight instigation. It's like, hey, I heard so and so was saying this about you. I got your back. And then you go talk to the other side. Hey, yeah, so and so said something about
It's
you.
hurting. It's
I
really
got your back.
hurting.
Yeah.
They're
And then
hurting them
and
into
then
Well
and
done,
then
tolerance.
comrade.
and then last night, Tyler, I know you're going to cover it, but last night was literally like a moment for the room, and yeah. So,
anywho, this is going to be a really big humanitarian crisis, and the UN is calling this the biggest humanitarian crisis in modern history, even much bigger than Yemen or Syria, which it is, because Syria was 4 million people. This is 23 million people.
that's all of
Starving
Southern
people,
California.
starving people.
About
That's
40
all of
actually.
Southern California, to put it in perspective.
Yeah, from LA to San Diego, Riverside, the whole lower half of California. Yeah.
I just wanted to just add a little bit. It's a geopolitics, right? Destroying countries. Look at Somalia. It became stateless after the 91 collapse of socialism. Before that, it's just that Russia versus the U.S., which is West versus East. Ziad Barre, who was the former president, was trying to get help from, try to keep his country neutral, but those two fighting countries just wouldn't allow him. So he was trying to get help from the U.S. and then the U.S. would give something, and then when they see Russia didn't have interest, they would back out. So he would go to Russia and this and that. And then when the socialism collapsed in '91, both of them lost interest, and all of the sudden, the clans started fighting, and all of the sudden it became lawless. And then the U.S. tried to establish some kind of presence. In fact, using the Ethiopian military and giving a lot of funding to the former government entity of the Ethiopians, who became like really military country because of the funding they were getting, including the drones to roam Somalia and keep at bay of the Islamic courts and Al Qaeda base and things like that. But in the process, Somalia became stateless, and Somalia broke now into three now. Somaliland, that's establishing peace and security, and they are functioning really a good government. But then the UN doesn't recognize them. They said you are a split off a country. You have to be part of, I guess, Somalia. And then there's Puntland that also has independent government, but that Again, they are not internationally recognized. And the Mogadishu, which is a small piece now, the international community is trying to establish a functioning government, but no, they don't have legitimacy. So now it's becoming stateless. So this is the result geopolitics and how countries don't responsibly exit or responsibly develop the leadership of the local government and things like that. And I really would recommend for everyone interested to look at Somalia, how the same thing happened, and that's where they can end up being a complete stateless place. So like you said, Yemen and others. So yeah, that's just I wanted to put in the 5 cents, my 5 cents, where it's next door to Ethiopia. That millions of Somalians are a refugee in Ethiopia because of it too.
Yep.
Yeah, the crappy decolonialization. I mean, I put like, the UK is the number one crappy like decolonializer. Like they basically cut and run, and that's most of them are crap at it, and that's because basically they govern a country by saying we have all the important roles of government, and you guys are the general populace and serve us. And then when they leave chaos. They didn't train anybody. They didn't do it. So this happens all over. France is not any better. They're just all a mess. But the part that worries me the most, oh, sorry, messy. The part that worries me the most is that in all of this conversation of political maneuvering, like the main conversation about a bunch of people now starving is lost, right? Like this is what happens, is that these populations are viewed as like a threat, or oh, this is going to upset a balance and the power struggle is going to differ or something like that. But ultimately what has happened, everybody has cut off relations with Afghanistan because of the Taliban, so there's no trade flowing. And then all the Afghanis with money converted to crypto, and like their money is gone, even if they're in F's for crypto. They're a terrible use case for crypto because most don't have any sort of access whatsoever to, like regular, internet. They can't actually administer it. And there's like no on ramps. It's really just the wealthy people who figured out how to do this. And then so they got their money out quickly. But the bigger problem is there's a crap ton of people there that are essentially left without any resources. So the wealthy people aren't reinvesting in Afghanistan to feed them. The rest of the world is not going, okay, look, this is this crap situation. Let's figure out how to at least make sure that the people who didn't really have part of any of this or just trying to survive, or how are they going to live? Like, this is what makes me really sad about all of these stories whenever this happens, including like the Rohingya and other people. Like the whole story of all of the people who are getting screwed in this whole process because they're basically just considered to be pawns or trouble. Like, there's nothing done. There's no conversation around how do we address these fundamental issues so that maybe we just get these people not to starve, and then don't worry about all the floods of people coming in and out and that kind of thing. It gets me very upset that I feel like the focus always changes.
Yep. So, as I said, we don't want to repeat the deep dive we had last time, but it was a really special conversation we had last time. There was somebody from Afghanistan who joined us on stage, and it was very moving. So, the next one is that Spotify's car things wait list signups surpassed 2 million people and climbing. And this is a Spotify device for your car that they're testing, and the wait list is now more than 2 million people. So there you go. The next one is that Tesla debuts Sentry mode, a live camera access mode for your iPhone. Now you can get a live feed of your car's cameras from your phone. So if somebody bumps into your car, you'll get a message on your phone. Here, let's go live to your car and see what's going on. That's kind of genius. Sentry mode on your phone. And yes,
that American fuel economy is lower because of the size of Americans. Did anybody ever read that? That was an older thing that I saw, that one of the reasons why American cars are bigger and one of the reasons why they end up in practice getting lower fuel economy. Does anybody remember this? That it's because Americans are the size of Americans. We weigh down our
Well,
cars.
Well, it was actually that Americans like to transport larger quantities of objects and the road trip culture, I think, of America. So the engineering was biased towards not fuel economy, but the amount of load that you could tow for that amount of fuel.
Well, that's much nicer. I like that better.
And I heard the Europeans are saying that it's because we have so much land. There is so much space.
okay.
Because the roads in Europe, in UK, I lived in Manchester. They were built for those carriages for the king and queens and stuff like that. It wasn't built for big things. So they said when the immigrants went to North America and colonized, they had so much space that they just built big roads and big cars. At least that's the story I heard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so yeah, go ahead.
and now you won't have to have when you're doing a stakeout or something, you can just be somewhere else and your car can be doing remote stakeouts, so that might be a fun application as well. Interesting social implications there as well.
But it doesn't take images of what happened, right? So it's basically somebody hit your car, but that's the same amount of knowledge that you would have if you got up the next morning and went to go see your car. Oh, somebody hit my car. Unless they're actually collecting data about what exactly happened so that you can make someone accountable for it.
Well, they do. Yeah, I thought they do. I'm not sure here who has a Tesla, but if you have a Tesla, there's a compartment in the glove box, I think, where you can put the USB stick in, and then it records all of those events as well, right?
Yeah, my neighbor up the driveway used it to solve a break-in. Basically, his Tesla recorded a peripheral crime, and they got it off the USB.
Yeah, modern black box.
That's awesome.
Okay, hold on a sec here. I just screwed something up. I got a whole bunch of headlines here, but give me two seconds. Oh, geez. Wow, I really screwed it up. Okay, so the next headline is from Nerdstrom that Elon Musk's Starlink is in talks with two Philippine telcos to launch its ultra-fast satellite internet in a country with slow speeds and poor connectivity. Well, more to the point, they have thousands of islands, which makes it a real challenge to do telcos with cables. So Starlink is ideal for the Philippines, really. And for those interested in buying a private island, Philippines should certainly be on your shopping list. They have more islands available than anybody. So Starlink enables the possibility of converting a tropical island into a livable, defendable arrangement. So the next one is from Sudamini, that Twitter will let their Twitter subscribers. There is now a subscription to Twitter that those who want to pay for it. It's called Twitter Blue, and you get some interesting little features like a cute little bookmarking feature like you have in Pinterest. But now they're saying that the Twitter Blue subscribers will also be able to try new features early before anybody else. And next up is from Mr. Whale in the audience, who sends this one in, that CryptoPunk number 9998 just sold for $532 million, making it the most expensive NFT ever sold. And then some people in the comments to that tweet were highlighting how the trade is a bit suspicious, appears that somebody is essentially taking money out of one pocket and putting it in the other, that it's not as legitimate of a purchase as it might appear. And the next one is from Evan, and the headline is China's profitable business of enslaving Africa. And it's a documentary called The African Debt Trap from this year, 2021. Oh, and you got this from Reddit, apparently.
Yeah, it's a short documentary. It's like 20 minutes, really eye-opening. And if anyone listening thinks it's just China bashing, it explains how this sort of imperialism was really invented by the US back in the, 50s, 60s to, sort of build its influence in Central and South America. So
Yeah,
China's really copying the US playbook and taking it to a whole new level.
yes, it's been a conversation in the Africa rooms for like 4 years now at least. Like, and I've seen like a couple of good videos on this, but yeah, I'm guessing I don't know whether you there's a whole article, but yeah, if you read it, it kind of sums it up possibly.
Yeah, America did
Yeah, I think
a lot of shady shit, especially in South America.
That's
And
why the CIA is known as the Central Insurgency Agency.
That's why you don't say the CIA because you wouldn't put the in front of God, right? That's from Good
Yeah.
Shepherd.
I mean, in this case, it really is economic, you know, imperialism and, getting these countries in debt to the point where they have to kind of do what they are told.
yeah, but I mean,
yeah.
I mean, Messi has more firsthand knowledge of that perhaps than the rest of us. But the Kiran from Sri Lanka gave the most, candid experience of what's happened in Sri Lanka, where Sri Lanka maybe more than anybody has become a victim of this, where they've had to give over one of their ports there, which the port has now become militarized, which a lot of people in southern India are incredibly very aware of and sensitive about. And now they're bringing nuclear waste to the port, and it's Pakistan as
Yeah,
well
And
is a
they
huge
take
issue.
all
it's the
sorts of
third
ports,
part.
airports, train stations, like cargo. They take ships or whatever it is. They yeah.
I had an old business partner, and he was much older than me and wiser. And one thing he told me that'll always resonate is there comes a point when you owe someone so much money that you're worth more alive than dead. And that's the way these countries kind of are getting. So that's the sad reality. They're going to enslave
Welcome.
these countries.
I got a
The
phone call and I didn't hear exactly what you said.
The sad part of it is Africa leaders who are not really having the best interest of their countries. Otherwise, especially now the new scramble for Africa, they really increased interest from the West versus China, that they could have used that opportunity actually to negotiate and have actually something that's beneficial for their own countries. And instead, the corruption that a lot of the people are actually enriching themselves and just getting the next generation and countries responsible for paying all this because they just don't care about the country. So they would sign up anything like Uhuru Kenyatta, which we thought was a very progressive and very good leader in Kenya, after he saw Sri Lanka handing in their port, signed the Mombasa port for having a new financing that if Kenya defaults, China would take over the port. Zambia just defaulted in March, right? And now they have to probably give most of their mineral resources, which they already have, actually a bad deal. Ethiopia is one of the worst, highly indebted country, and most of the debt is China as well. Like you said, the railway, the airport, you name it, it's China. It's like all the infrastructure in the country is China. And I'm
Yeah,
just wondering, go
I
ahead.
don't
Leads me
I
to
don't want
say
to put
China
that
will not
totally
collapse in 10 years.
on the how it's like in full because it's really being stuck. hard place, right? And I've had this conversation like dragged out for I don't know how long, but we spoke about it for a good 5 hours. And what I summed up is the ability to work outside the boundaries of the West isn't very like it's not a very large sum of things that you can do. So creating debt in China is one of the only other things that you can do. And also the reality stands that there's not there's so little options to create, and there's so little options to be able to maneuver, that there's you can only work within the boundaries of what is written down, and most of what is written down isn't by us. So it's either people create new governments, which has happened in many places, and it's almost impossible to get right. But at the same time, it's almost a losing game from the start when you start like reading up about it and stuff like that.
Yeah,
It's
but that's the
sinister,
fault of.
predatory lending.
Yeah, I just want to say that like the originator of like this kind of really usurious, horrible financial indebtedness, as opposed to just annexing countries in order to just gain, tax revenue and assets. That was France and Haiti. That's where they basically just said, I mean, they didn't pay that off until 1954. And that was it's incredible. It was incredible what they did, like the amount that they charged, and they said, our Navy could be back, and that's when you see the difference in the growth between the Dominican Republic and Haiti, people need to factor in the fact that they had like 150 years of debt, basically, that they had to pay off. There's a book called by David Landis called "The Wealth and Poverty of Nations." It's supposed to be like sort of a sequel to "The Wealth of Nations." It's a really interesting book, and they have one of the premises in there is whether there should be debt to countries that are fundamentally net importers. And there's like this, he's got this geographic, discussion of, where net importers end up, being between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer. And, like this is the whole idea of whether or not, if, should there be, this kind of ongoing, multi-decade loan problem. Like, should there be debt, or should it just be like it should be gifted, right? Because if you're fundamentally going to be unable to repay, like part of the conditions of debt in general is that you only give debt to people who have the ability to repay without themselves going into bankruptcy or penury, right? And that's the problem, is that analysis isn't given to these countries. So fundamentally, the debt isn't really debt. It's really like it is he calls it something really interesting, like I don't like, it's something like financial servitude or something like that. But
Yeah, Haiti's issue is a little different in that the debt wasn't really a debt. We were just paying for breaking apart slavery. And then additional debt incurred in current times is really just to keep chaos going, right? Because the money goes directly to the pockets of those who are actually creating dissidents in the country. And that's by design, because as long as Haiti's in chaos, there's a lot of profiteering that happens all across the board.
oh, I mean, Haiti was France. That was I mean, that was because there was a revolution, right? And they said, if you the France said fine, we'll go,
It was
but we have a
brokered by
lot of
America,
military.
though.
I'm sorry.
That deal was brokered by America for France.
Exactly, exactly. That's actually the issue of why Haiti is still struggling. The
That is
Americans
correct.
actually took over, and then because they weren't happy about the slavery and the independence, and then they actually made it even worse than the French. The French.
That's very interesting. Oddly, not taught in American school.
Oh,
The only thing that I'm serious.
Are you
I didn't. That's
surprised?
not. That's. I mean, I believe you. I'm just saying. Like, I didn't learn it. The only thing I learned aside from that was the guano wars, where the U.S. and Haiti had this ongoing dispute before fertilizer was created. That Haiti had these massive guano fields, and the U.S. wanted access to them. The only other thing I learned about Haiti
and the U.S. involvement is that Alexander Hamilton wanted the U.S. to get involved um, in their uh, in their revolution, and the U.S. said no. It's and they said no mostly because they were like, no, it's like a slave state. We're not going to go in
But
and
they did eventually. Haitian soldiers did hit the shores of New Orleans and fought within the. More importantly, Americans sided with Spain because they had interest in Santo Domingo and dividing the country. And that's where they brokered the deal for the repayment to France, stating that Haiti had caused France to lose X amount of money through slavery. And that began the debt repayment, right? Additionally, they wanted to get back at Dessalines for writing over 1,700 letters to different countries stating that we would help them also free their slaves. So it was really a force to attempt to try and break the Pearl of the Antilles from freeing other slaves.
That's true. I'm in New Orleans, and
wow.
I have Haitian relatives that emigrated from Haiti in the 1800s. So that's part of my heritage too. But I believe the Guano Wars were Peru, not Haiti.
No, I mean that was Haiti because I remember I had to write about it when I worked at a think tank, and I was like, "This is all just weird." They had another one with
Well, you look it up. If you look it up,
oh
the well-known Guano Wars were Peru and Chile. It
yeah, over the Atacama Desert, yeah. But
And
there's
Haiti was
actually.
also responsible for helping Colombia. So they were hated by most.
I'm sorry, I lost the end of that. Or is
When
anybody?
Toussaint told them that even if you
Sorry,
kill
I
me,
lost.
the revolution will not stop, he meant it.
Wait, Sharon. Sorry, you dropped out in the middle.
Yes, I said that Haiti also helped Colombia as well. And so they amalgamated a great deal of hatred from several different countries because of their tenacity around slavery. And that sort of broke every attempt to really free other slaves because you had America, France, and Spain congeal together to create um, a resolution to the Pearl of the Antilles. Remember, Haiti was the biggest port, the biggest export. So all of the goods traversed through Haiti before, or at the time, Hispaniola, before it came to the Americas. So it was set to be the largest and strongest country, and they couldn't allow for that.
Okay, we got
Wow, I'm sorry. I cannot believe, like, every time I come across a hole in education, and mine has it too. But I mean, it happens here. But every time you come across them, they're kind of shocking, right? Where you're like, "What the hell did I learn?"
No, but you shouldn't be surprised, right? Even currently, the US, especially the Republicans, are actually
Thank you.
even to
Let
change the
me turn on the.
story of African Americans, right? They don't want kids to be taught about the history of the US and the slavery. They are fighting to get rid of even that type of teaching to their kids. So if you go a generation or two down, some kids may even not learn about slavery in the US. So it's not really surprising that they are rewriting history.
It's easier to say that Haiti is the poorest country in the islands, but let's remember America sequestered one of our islands without asking us. It is now theirs. They never fought for it, they never won it, and it's one of the most largest resources. We also have a basin of oil in our country that doubles that of Venezuela, and we've had gold as well, which the Clintons have staked claim on without any kickback. So there's a lot to Haiti, and the reason why it remains in chaos. There's so much pillaging left to be done there.
I feel like maybe there could be like a room on understanding, like I guess either vestiges of imperialism or like understanding the like geopolitical current status of Haiti and I mean a lot of other island nations relative to this kind of a conflict, because I feel like I don't know. I thought I knew more because I have studied it, like no, on my own, not like not enough clearly. So
I feel like I could learn a lot more. So that's it's fascinating and always a little sad to find out that, education is so biased, even though I talk about education being so like limited and stuff like that, but it just sucks that that's what you learn. And,
Yeah,
you know,
we
you
got
just
to.
don't
So,
learn.
fun fact also, out
Make
of
it
the vestiges of
last point.
yep, out
Go
of the
ahead.
vestiges of the soldiers that landed in New Orleans, one of them founded a trade between the natives and America, and founded Chicago.
Quick point on that.
Yeah.
There's a museum in New Orleans that is devoted to Haiti. So you can everything Sharon's talking about. You can see there's a whole new museum in New Orleans about that. Thanks.
Alrighty. So Evan just found a fantastic link that a new version of the Aura ring is coming.
Just
Uh,
pre-ordered it. Get yours.
what is new in the newest version, Evan?
There's period tracking, which obviously not relevant to me, but also continuous heart rate monitoring and I guess bronze sensitivity improvements and other features I'm probably not aware of.
For the low price of
But
what?
$299,
Same price.
same price, or
Yeah.
$50. Maybe, I think it's
The big
$50
one,
less.
the big one from my perspective is the oxygen tracking. The sensing, the fact that they can now
Oh
do a
yeah, that's
better
huge
job.
for COVID. Yeah.
They do SpO2 sensing, which from a it looks at your oxygen saturation, and that's really helpful. Just envision what happens in the pandemic. Obviously, envision what happens long term. Look at what they did with heart rate tracking and heart rate variability. I wonder what this is going to do for respiratory tracking and respiratory variability. I'm just really excited. I'm pre-ordering mine as well.
Alrighty. Next up, a judge acquits an Indian man who lived at the Chicago airport for 3 months. Not very tech, but super interesting nonetheless. Cook County judge acquits Indian man on the charge this week without his attorney having to mount a defense. A man who spent 3 months living in a secured terminal at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport instead of flying home to India, as he had planned, has been acquitted on a felony trespassing charge. Cook County judge acquitted him on the charge this week without his attorney having to mount a defense. 37-year-old is expected back in court on Friday on an escape charge for allegedly violating the terms of his electronic monitoring while out on bond for the trespassing charge. The judge's rationale for acquitting him weren't immediately clear, but after his January 16th arrest, the TSA, which regulates security at the airport, determined he hadn't violated airport regulations. Okay, not as interesting as we thought. But anyway, the next one is from Sudamini. The new Hong Kong law to censor old movies for security breaches. Authorities have embarked on sweeping crackdown to root out Beijing's critics after pro-democracy protests convulsed in the city 2 years ago. So basically, Beijing is now tightening the screws and putting a lot of scrutiny on Hong Kong films. And all of the films in Hong Kong's in the theater made in Hong Kong or shown in Hong Kong, etc. And that's kind of interesting because you could argue perhaps that the films in movie theaters are kind of halfway between the physical world and the internet in terms of the content people consume. And what's concerning is that it's concerning that basically Hong Kong is not going to have the Western world's films anymore. They kind of now have the films that they have in mainland China, which are highly censored and cherry picked and etc. But that's a prelude to a foreshadowing of the fact that it will happen to the internet next, because this includes digital films. So in fact, it is the beginnings of China bringing its internet to Hong Kong, as predicted. And that's the headline from thehindu.com. So I just tweeted that out. The next is from India. It says, I'm not a pilot, but I just flew a helicopter over California. The system called Flight OS provides a glimpse into the future of flight. The Southern California startup that designed Flight OS, called Skyrise, said it's working on the so that people can autonomously fly helicopters. Next up, the New York Times has a piece called Why Humans and Not Machines Make the Tough Calls on Moderating Comments. Technology helps the New York Times find thousands of comments a day, but only human judgment can apply Times standards to reject submissions. One editor gave a tour of the decisions that make up her job. And this is no surprise to geeks, because it's very well known that the technology doesn't really exist to moderate YouTube comments or Facebook comments, etc. That's a whole lot of what we call AAI, artificial intelligence, which are humans, aka Filipinos and Filipinas in the Philippines.
Wait, didn't Facebook get crushed for doing the
Yeah,
very same thing?
say, did they state numbers like how many percent is handled by the AI and how much is handled by the humans?
It says software helps the Times keep up with the deluge of 12,000 reader comments. Comments appear in 15% of all articles published online. Wow.
Oh, God damn you. Why are you
I'm,
trying to make us do this math? Just tell us
no,
the percent moderation by AI so we could slam you for picking on Facebook for the exact same thing.
Exact same thing, exactly.
it says the
So let's do the math.
comments appear on 15% of articles. The Times has, since 2017, the Times has depended on a program designed by Google that helps automate the vetting processes by relying on patterns from more than 16 million acceptances and rejections of comments by Times moderators. And despite the software's power, it cannot differentiate between crude and acceptable uses of the same word, like BS. Deeper questions also arise. Where should you draw the line between criticizing and insulting, nicknaming and name-calling, extrapolating and digressing? It is the job of Irwin Wright to render verdicts on these matters of ethics and etiquette. She's the senior staff editor at the Times Communication Community Desk, a small team devoted to moderating comments. Last month, Ms. Rice allowed a journalist to observe her work through a queue of submitted comments, responding to a profile of Jen Psaki, the Biden administration press secretary. Here's the quote: "We have had some criticism of her, and as long as it doesn't delve into name calling or any sort of information that we know to be untrue, criticism is fair game. By making sure the comments section reflects the civil tone of the Times, Ms. Wright and her colleagues help engage readers and give them a sense of involvement and belonging surrounding the paper's work. The Times software automatically approves some comments, and moderators can simply take down anything posted in error, but the software is not allowed to summarily dismiss the comment. Every dismissed comment is hand rejected by a human moderator." The senior editor in charge of the community desk, "We want to make sure we're being fair to readers." It doesn't say what percent is done human, and none of the takedowns are human. They're all. I'm sorry. None of the takedowns are automated. They're all human.
Yeah. So 0%. AI catches 0%, everybody. Let's take it to Jimmy Kimmel and, Stephen Colbert. 0 is better than 5.
So it is interesting because the New York Times was part of the hit piece brigade that was haranguing Facebook for and intentionally misinforming everybody that Facebook's AIs only take down 3 to 5% of hate speech, which it turns out it's done by humans. And now the New York Times is finding out that their own moderation is done by humans. And so it turns out New York Times' AI takes down 0% of hate speech. So it's really, it's weird. No doubt this all, I can just imagine the conversation at El Pollo Loco they had over lunch about, hey, did you know that we don't take down any of our content with AIs either? They probably are using humans over there to do that because we only use humans to do that. Anyway,
If anybody not in America knows, El Pollo Loco is this delicious chicken place, and Tyler loves using it as his meeting spot for all these high power,
it's
high
like I'll
IQ
start using Taco
individuals.
Bell. Maybe Taco Bell is a better example. You're right. El Pollo Loco just sounds ridiculous. Like you're not going to have any kind of serious
No,
situation
I'm just,
happening at an El Pollo
I
Loco.
I'm
love
just,
it.
yeah,
I
I'm just
love
framing
it.
it
It's
for
like we
everybody.
use Casa Bonita at Bloom Standard as our thing.
War-
By the
Warren
way,
Bu-
Breaking Bad would have something to say about that.
Warren Buffett used to do interviews at Dairy Queen because he owns it.
Yes.
exactly.
So the answer to the New York Times headline, why humans, not machines, make the tough call on comments, because machines aren't really up for the task just yet. And that's why you should have known that when you wrote the headline that Facebook's AIs only remove 3 to 5% of hate speech. But you didn't know that, New York Times, and now you're writing your own article teaching yourself as to why Facebook's AIs only remove 3 to 5%, but you were confused. You thought AIs were the sole source of the removal of that content. So it's not, you're educating yourself, New York Times. Good on you. You're learning
It's like
something.
when Wile E. Coyote picks up the book about gravity as he's,
Falling down,
he
yeah.
hasn't started falling yet, and then once he reads it, he starts falling.
Oh, childhood memories there. So the next one is that Apple is sued in China for selling iPhones without a charger. A group of university students in China has sued Apple for not including a charger with the iPhone 12 Pro Max. Students claimed the included USB-C to Lightning cable was not compatible with other chargers, leaving one student unable to charge the phone as advertised. The plaintiffs also did not believe Apple's waste reduction claims. Okay, we don't believe you, Apple. We're suing you. We don't believe what your claims about your waste reduction. We'll see you in court. And this is coming from students. Yes, are we believing this is coming from students?
No.
The plaintiffs, Apple was only using this as an excuse to promote MagSafe wireless chargers that waste more energy than their wired counterparts, the students argued. They want Apple to
Legit claim.
they want Apple to supply the charger as well as pay legal fees and $16 for breach of contract. Apple reportedly told the Beijing virtual court it was common for phone brands to sell power adapters separately and that the government sanctioned this practice. However, the students pointed out that multiple Chinese companies offer the choice of an adapter in the box. You can buy the Xiaomi Mi 11 with or without a power brick, for example. The case is still ongoing, and there's no guarantees it will lead to either compensation for the students or a shift in Apple's no charger policy, the report said. Even if the case prompts change, it may only lead to Apple offering the charger as an option at checkout, it added. Oh, right. You bought the phone. Would you like to buy the charger? If you don't want to buy the charger, that's on you. Okay, so the next one. What do you remember the Apple suit story? There's a couple of really interesting lawsuits going on with Apple in China by individuals, which appeared to not be by the individuals that it claims to be by. It appears to be a bit of a effort on behalf of the government to kind of punish Apple in an interesting way. Anywho, we can. I noticed my buddy Roloff. Why don't you raise your hand so we can get you on stage in case we get some more AI articles here, which no doubt we do. We will, as we always do. So a friend of mine from the Stockholm ecosystem who's an AI aficionado is in the audience. Roloff, if you could raise your hand, I'll do the next article. That eBay revenue outlook disappoints as pandemic-led boom fades. So eBay had a bad quarter. And China launches dual-use satellite that will target space junk. The satellite was placed into a geosynchronous transfer orbit to help kind of bring down some of that floating space junk that could jeopardize other satellites. And Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are now worth almost $500 billion. The value of the two fortunes, a sum bigger than the market value of Johnson & Johnson and about equal to that of America's biggest bank, JP Morgan Chase. And journalists want you to know, to get angry, that there are rich people. And you aren't rich, so grab your pitchforks. Let's have a revolution. No, we're not causing division. No, that's Facebook who's causing division. We're trying to help you. We're trying to inform you. No, we're
Well,
not.
the new infrastructure bill is going to take the surtax on the 700 richest Americans. So that's coming with this new legislation.
Yep. India seeks info on tech processes used by Facebook. The missive follows recent revelations by Facebook whistleblower that have alarmed the Indian government, specifically with regard to how Facebook operates in India. So now they want to do a little investigation. And the next up is Gizmo. This is an interesting historical one. Gizmodo is a tech blog, competes with Engadget, and now those were the first two, and now there's a million tech blogs, honestly, gadget blogs. And Gizmodo had a really interesting moment. Perhaps the most interesting moment is in Gizmodo's history was when they got access to the iPhone 4 when an Apple employee left it behind at a bar. And this caught the ire of Stephen Jobs, who went ballistic on Gizmodo, and he wanted his iPhone back. And he didn't want any of the information leaked. And this was an incredibly serious affair at the time because Google was desperately trying to copy the iPhone at that time, the Android phone, the operating system, and what have you. So Steve was particularly super incredibly outrageously irate and was demanding to get the phone back and that Gizmodo not, publish anything. And Brian Lamb was the editor at the time, and that was an interesting moment in tech blogging history. Anyway, so Gizmodo's the headline today from The Verge, which was kind of born out of their competitor Engadget, actually. And in part, there's been some people from Gizmodo as well over the years, but Gizmodo's photos from the massive iPhone 4 leak have disappeared. Apparently, link rot has destroyed the internet and our shared history of that event. Expired links.
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
And the Wayback Machine remembers, so the photos are still there somewhere. It says, photographs from a historic event in tech news history. The day Gizmodo reporter published hands-on pics of the then not yet announced iPhone 4 are now missing. And they're not alone. Vast quantities of pictures from the Gizmodo media sites, the media sites like The Onion, Jalopnik, and Deadspin. This was Gawker Media, who owned those sites. Have been removed, reportedly intentionally, according to Gawker. A recent Gawker report highlights that BuzzFeed has also been wiping many older images from the web. Still, BuzzFeed's reasons for doing so is relatively apparent after management explained the copyright claims on old photos deemed some of them high risk. Both cases are examples of link rot, where content on the internet is drastically changes because it either disappears entirely or because essential pieces have gone missing. Anyway, so that those are now gone. So the next one is Amazon's Ring camera has an eavesdropping problem. This doorbell camera can pick up neighborhood conversations at the end of the driveway by default. Let's see.
You don't say.
Up until 2 years ago, a British scientist named Dr. Mary Fairhurst lived in a brick house at the end of a quaint road of connected homes in Oxfordshire, UK. Her neighbor, an audiovisual technician named John Woodward, lived on the other side of a narrow road between their houses. Woodward had installed several Amazon Ring cameras around his property, including on his shed at the end of his driveway and on his door as a doorbell. In 2018, Woodward was doing refurbishments on his house and invited Fairhurst for a tour. He showed her a video clip on his smartwatch of a car driving out of their communal car park, a live feed from one of his cameras. Woodward seemed to be trying to impress her. Fairhurst later told the court, but she was alarmed. The cameras could see where she parked her car and other parts of the surrounding property. Fairhurst later sued Woodward for breaching her privacy with the cameras, but the presiding judge spotted a bigger issue. Woodward's cameras could hear just as well as they could see. Melissa Clark, a county court judge in Oxford, pointed out that Woodward's Ring camera could reliably record audio at conversational volume from 68 feet away. Based on an experiment carried out by one of these witnesses in the case, that's about the length of a 10-pin bowling lane or a cricket pitch. When triggered by movement, the cameras mounted on Woodward's doorbell and at the foot of his drive would capture conversations on her driveway, at her front door, and even in her backyard. If Woodward wanted, he could identify who was speaking because he was familiar with his neighbors. She added, all told, obtaining audio data was even more problematic and detrimental than video data. The case, which will probably be cited in UK courts for years to come, spotlights how the listening concerns normally associated with Amazon Alexa devices applies to its cameras too. Back in 2018, when Woodward showed off his cameras, he didn't have the ability to turn off their audio recording capabilities. Amazon only made that possibility through firmware update last year. Today, audio recording is switched on by default when Ring cameras are purchased. A spokeswoman for Amazon said, "We strongly encourage our customers to respect their neighbors' privacy and comply with any applicable laws when using their Ring device." Okay. Next up is from The Verge. It says how to use a SharePlay in your iPhone to share your FaceTime screen. Use SharePlay to share videos and music during a FaceTime call. Very cool indeed. Fun little feature merging. The next one is a major Hollywood union could vote soon on a deal for better streaming pay. An earlier tentative deal narrowly avoided a massive strike. A Hollywood union representing tens of thousands of production workers will soon decide whether to ratify agreements that will, among other labor protections, enforce better pay for streaming services. The International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees announced Tuesday that it reached a tentative 3-year area standards agreement with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers that delivers our members a fair deal on streaming, according to the union's international president, Matthew Loeb. A spokesperson for the union told The Verge that lawyers are still working out details of the agreement, which could take a few days. After that, members will need time to review the terms. A vote should then be scheduled in the next few weeks. The tentative deal reached this week will cover some 20,000 workers on productions in TV and film, including crew, artists, editors, and other behind-the-scenes roles from 23 local unions across the United States. Earlier this month, a tentative deal was reached for separate basic and videotape contracts that cover another 40,000 workers represented by 13 West Coast-based local unions. That earlier agreement narrowly avoided a major Hollywood strike, which was supported nearly unanimously by the union's members and would have had an industry-wide impact. The union's members supported the strike authorization after negotiations stalled, and the proposed area standards agreement will improve pay significantly by up to 60% for its lowest paid workers, according to the union. All members who operate under the new contract will see their pay increase by a minimum of 9% over the 3-year term. The proposed agreement also covers rest periods, breaks, wage terms, and payouts for streaming services. We are able to achieve gains in all of our core areas, Loeb said in a statement. Quality of life issues were at the top of our priority list. Okay. Next up, let me tweet that one out, is from Poppy, an MIT expert on work, says any boss who thinks employees will return to the office is dreaming. The author of a prescient book on the workplace tells the MIT, and if companies make employees who can do their jobs at home go into the office, it will be hard. The next one is that Glasgow is getting ready for COP26, the world's and biggest annual climate summit, where most of the prime ministers of the world gather, including Joe Biden. And Glasgow is bracing itself for the largest protests seen in Scotland since the demonstrations against the Iraq War in 2003. COP26 will make Glasgow the world's most high-value terror target next week, with more than 100 heads of state attending the summit. A ring of steel is being erected around the conference site on the north bank of the Clyde, which includes the SSE Hydro and the Scottish Event Campus, as well as guarding against lethal threats. Security forces have to manage potential disruption from climate change protesters. A cat-and-mouse game is underway between activists who want to disrupt the UN Climate Change Summit and police who are determined to stop them in their tracks. Although a range of potential disorders is possible, from anarchists to single-issue protests against specific heads of state, the main attention will be focused on environmental campaigners. So they're getting ready for a massive protest, which they should. And the next one is that Squid Game banned from Chinese e-commerce as Beijing resists Korean wave. China's main e-commerce platforms have blocked keywords searches for Squid Game-related products. The dystopian South Korean Netflix show is a sensation in China despite not being legally available in China. It seems likely that the bans result from government pressure. A search of the term Squid Game yielded no results on the platform, including Alibaba's Taobao, JD, and Pinduoduo. Merchants have worked out other ways to sell their products, advising customers to search for keywords such as squid mask and Halloween costume. We tried other words such as squid mask, which worked to search for our products, a merchant told South China Morning Post. Based on our experience, only Squid Game can't be used to search on the platforms. He added that Squid Game-related merchandise has spawned more traffic to his online shop following the show's immense popularity in China. The South Korean drama has generated massive revenue for Chinese manufacturers busy churning out Squid Game-related products for domestic and overseas shoppers. Most Squid Game products available on the international market are made in Chinese factories, which have seen a surge in customers asking for deliveries by Halloween. The demand is huge, says a merchant told South China Morning Post, saying that most orders were made from outside China in countries including the US, Canada, Britain, and South Korea. The show is very popular. The record-breaking drama instantly became an international phenomenon and was also popular in China, despite Netflix being unavailable in China.
Maybe it's because China made their own version of it.
Yeah, they did that too, yeah. Okay, the next one is from... it's a survey of the global e-commerce landscape. The future of e-commerce looks bright. By 2025, the global e-commerce market is projected to reach $4.2 trillion. And it says, here are the 5 trends shaping the future of e-commerce. Number 1, omni-channel shopping. Number 2, AI and AR. Number 3, new payment options like digital wallets and cryptocurrencies. Number 4, the rise of visual commerce like AR. And number 5, data-driven dynamic pricing. And that's what they say are the 5 trends shaping the future of e-commerce. Next up, speaking of which, here it is about e-commerce and China. Take the last 2 articles and put them in one. Here it is from the Telegraph. The dark patterns fueling the nation's fast fashion online shopping addiction. This is e-commerce fashion. E-commerce sites are rife with tools that manipulate us into spending more money. For a fashion editor, I'm quite a procrastinator when it comes to buying clothes for myself. It's with good reason. As I want to spend my money wisely, but I also want everything in my wardrobe to be for a forever piece and not bursting with clothes I never wear. And what this article gets into is how the Chinese site Shine, that there's tools known as dark patterns, and they've been making headlines this week after Chinese online giant Shine was named the most manipulative fast fashion e-commerce site according to new research. Shine ranked most manipulative fast fashion brand in the dark patterns use of dark patterns. How bad can Shine be? It asks, and then it says, "Oh boy, here we go. This won't be news to Harry Brignol, the UX specialist who first coined the term dark patterns in 2010, which calls out the bad practice. Essentially, dark patterns are deceptive and manipulative tricks that you see on websites and apps or other digital products to get you to do things that you would not otherwise have done. Often, the outcome is you buy something that you didn't intend to buy, or you were manipulated into buying it based on false advertising." And they're saying that Shine
or
is...
in or in Klarna's case, you're forced to do a repay or a split payment with some kind of interest to it. Klarna is the definition of dark pattern. You can read more about this on darkpattern.org. That's actually a very, very good site, Johan.
Yeah, it's a whole tactic strategy employed by all over the web. Speaking of China, Sundamini sends in this one that China removes top financial news outlet from official media list. Amid China's continuous crackdown on press freedom, observers now worry that the trend is transforming China into a society without accountability. Because they completely control the press now. They've removed all press they do not control, with the exception of the South China Morning Post, which is why we're counting the days until the headline that their offices have been stormed. The next one, are NFTs a money laundering gold mine? Is the article, and it's a very, very long article. And I imagine they give both sides of that argument. So I will just do the prudent thing and tweet that out for those who are interested in that topic. And then the next one is from who's that? Big tech data centers spark worry over scarce Western water. Conflicts over water are as old as history itself, but the massive Google data centers on the edge of this Oregon town on the Columbia River represent an emerging 21st century concern. Yes, and now you know why Microsoft, in the past 24 hours, says that their data centers will recycle 95% of water, because they know that headlines like this are coming because we have droughts. And people are going to try to figure out who's using all the water, and they're going to find out that these data centers and chip manufacturers are using ungodly amounts of water. And then people, like those environmental protesters going up to Glasgow, are going to do all kinds of shenanigans to those facilities. And so preemptively, they're going to start making announcements about how their facilities are water neutral. And the next one, Clubhouse CEO says could let under 18s use its app. Clubhouse could ease its requirement that its users be at least 18 years old to use the social audio app, the information reports. citing company's co-founder and CEO Paul Davidson. Davidson says company would like to open the social audio app to people who are younger down the line, though it wants to be ready when it does and have all the right protections in place and be adequately staffed. Clubhouse has more than 80 employees now, and Davidson expects staffing to grow to more than 100 in 6 months.
There are already a bunch of kids on this app. Just FYI.
And Evan found a really interesting video of an Amazon worker at home who oversees the Amazon delivery drivers from their home.
You gotta see this video, and it's got drones, it's got everything.
I just retweeted it to the Tech News Twitter account, so Cheryl might pin it, or I'll race her to pin it. Let's see who's faster, Cheryl. Copy link to tweet.
I mean, I see why Amazon's doing it. I mean, the efficiency is off the charts, but it is the panopticon in real life. It's just...
Where are you pinning these, by the way? Because
I just pinned it to the top of the room.
You got to update your app. Otherwise,
Yeah,
I
just updated my app at the beginning of the conversation, and I'm not seeing it.
You may have to close it again or open it.
And so it shows somebody at home with a bunch of screens, essentially stalking Amazon drivers. And then when he sees them he can see the cameras that shows the driver, shows the road, shows other things, and he sees a bunch of data about the drivers if they're late. And then if he really gets suspicious, he launches a drone to watch from above. So we can get a real view of everything that's going on. And Rent the Runway opens at $23 per share in its stock market
he's not
debut.
A worker. That person doesn't work for Amazon. They're just doing this with their own equipment?
No, that's it. The video is of an Amazon employee, as I recall.
Okay.
However, it raises an interesting question, because the drivers technically are not Amazon employees. But I believe the person doing the monitoring is.
Yes, that's right. I mean, it's just a TikTok video the employee put up there. I bet Amazon is furious about having their scenario shown to the world.
So the next one is from Dr. Fran, and it says, Facebook's next billion-dollar idea is clothing in the metaverse. Mark Zuckerberg said, Facebook's goal is to help the metaverse reach 1 billion people and hundreds of billions of dollars of digital commerce. So I just tweeted that out. And then Dr. Fran has this one, which asks the question, or shows the graphic of, this is what happens when you see the face of someone you love. The moments when you recognize someone, a lot happens all at once. We aren't aware of any of it. And it shows a map of the brain and the areas that get light up when you see the face of someone you love. And the next one's from Ken from the Wall Street Journal. The global chip shortage is far from over as wait times get longer. The global semiconductor shortage is worsening, with wait times lengthening, buyers hoarding products, and the potential end looking far from over. And Ken also sends in a new review of the brand new Apple AirPods version 3 from the Wall Street Journal. They say that they sound great if they stay in your ears. The third generation AirPods feature better sound, battery life, water resistance, but have a different shape that might not fit your ears. And Chase Digital Bank arrives on Google Play and Apple App Store. JP Morgan Chase is inviting UK consumers to head to the Google Play and Apple Play Store to download its new digital current account app. Wow, look at this. The big banks are getting serious. Making apps and shit. Fantastic. You're really, really rocking the fintech. The next one is a video of a factory robot. And what do we got next? Thailand retail giant pilots cryptocurrency coin for its malls. And Thailand has a lot of shopping malls, and most of them are run by one company. And that company, called Sentry, is planning a cryptocurrency. That's kind of all you need to know for now. I will keep you updated myself on the progress on that one. and what else is next here? Wharton Business School to accept tuition payments in Bitcoin. Students who sign up for an online Wharton course called Economics of Blockchain and Digital Assets can pay in Bitcoin or Ethereum, which makes sense because that would be a little hypocritical to teach a course about the economics of blockchain and digital assets and not accept Bitcoin. You would kind of look kind of outdated, would you not? And we will hold on there and save now that we just passed 5 minutes past our normal stopping point, and we have 24 hours of tweets to go through. I do, and then we will have 24 more hours of tweets to go through when we meet 24 hours from now. And we will do, as we always do, the special edition Saturday Marathon where we go through all 48 hours of tweets. Already looking forward to it. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody, and thank you for another awesome week of tech news